stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I have the following announcements. A report out of the May 17th, last week's 2011 closed session, public employment, pursuant to Government Code Section 54957. By a unanimous vote, with Supervisor Spellman absent, the Board appointed Assistant County Counsel Janice Elliott to the position of County Counsel for Calaveras County, effective July 16, 2011. The second announcement is there will be no Board of Supervisors meeting next week, May 31st, as it is the 5th Tuesday of the month. So everybody can now be aware that the Board can count to 5. So with that, I'll make the further announcement that I have to excuse myself at 10:30 a.m. this morning, and Gary Tofinelli will conduct the remainder of the meeting. Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. Excuse me. They will be acted upon by one time by the Board without further discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested member of the public may request that any item on the consent agenda be removed for further discussion prior to the Board's taking action. Does any board member wish to pull any item on the consent agenda? Does any staff member wish to pull any item on the consent agenda? Is there any member of the public here present this morning that has any item on the consent agenda, items 1 through 7 inclusive, that wish to have discussed with or by the Board prior to the Board's taking action? Al Segala. 7. Okay. Any other public member? Seeing none, the chair is open.
Number 3 and number 6, please.
Okay, 3 and 6.
Actually, I'd like to pull number 4.
Huh?
Number 4.
Okay, number 4. Any other public member? Chair is open for motion or approval on the balance of the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second. I have a motion by Supervisor Walensky, a second by Supervisor Spellman. Is there further board discussion? All in favor indicate by stating aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes on a 5-0 vote of the Board of Supervisors. We'll go back to item 3, a minute order authorizing execution of an amendment to the road maintenance agreement between Calaveras County and 7-Eleven Materials Incorporated, which provides funding to mitigate impacts from material hauling on the Milton Jenny Lynn Road. Peter, please come to the podium. You state your name for the record and sign.
My name is Peter Reyes, Rancho Calaveras. I just have a quick question for you. There's a 2.4 that gives a hardship consideration.
That's what?
Hardship, economical hardship to the company. Reconsideration of that fees they pay. Is that a normal procedure for the county when somebody's paying road fees for that Jenny Milton Road? I presume that's the name of the roads that they're using. If they get into trouble economically, they have an option to talk to that's what I want to find out. The public war is going to determine how much they're going to lower their fees, and is this option to the general public? Like individuals paying, call it whatever you want it, I call it the toll road on my road. If some individual gets into economical problems, can I come to public work and say, hey, lower my fees because I'm going broke? Is it available to the public in general? Is this specific?
This is a commercial operation. It's not...
Hey, fine. I'm a commercial operation. Okay, so everybody else taxpayers, basically.
They're already paying extra for their impacts on the road.
So do I, sir.
As a citizen, you don't pay extra
Oh, really?
to drive it more.
Yes, sir, I do. Okay,
No.
but I get into the debate.
Okay.
Excuse me, sir. But I get into the debate. I'm paying extra. So are they. Which is I respect it. I think it's a very good idea, and I support it. They have availability when they have economical problems because they're not getting as much for their whatever they're mining.
The answer, Peter, is it's not available to you as an individual.
Thank you. That's what I want to know.
Mr. Chair, I believe the subject before us is the elimination, at least in part, is the elimination of the hardship provision. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
So that might render the comment moot.
It's still a policy, so...
Deborah Mullen, Public Works. Supervisor Walensky is correct. That's one of the elements of the amended road maintenance agreement, is that the hardship clause be eliminated based on the fact that, as Mr. Reyes brings up, there's no clear criteria for establishing what that hardship is when it occurs, and also that it would likely occur to the county at the same time and in the same way. So the hardship clause is eliminated in the agreement.
Okay. Further discussion on item 3. Chair's open for a motion.
So moved.
Second. I have a motion by Supervisor Callaway, a second by Supervisor Walensky. Further board discussion. All in favor so indicate by stating aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes on a 5-0 vote of the board. Move forward to item 4, a resolution adopting the attached County of Calaveras fraud policy. Darren, you pulled this.
Yes, I was wondering, I like the idea of the fraud policy. Obviously, we have to go through with this to make sure that we receive the proper amount of our funding, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, I was wondering, the guidelines that are stipulated in this fraud policy, are those things synonymous with our overall fraud policy for the government center here in San Andreas, or is this only specific to our funded projects?
No, it is not specific. CalEMA basically, through our funds, in order to continue to receive them, and more departments are actually getting those funding, what we did is the individual departments actually have to have a fraud policy as part of their checkoff list for the audit. What we decided to do was take the opportunity. We have language in the Calaveras County ordinance, but we decided to do a countywide policy, so it's not just specific to our funds, but any funds that the county would receive, so that we don't have to do this again. We'd have a specific policy that's out there for all departments, all counties, and then we'll be able to communicate that to employees as well, and
So
take care of ARA.
Okay, so this satisfies ARA as well as we'll use this as a blueprint as a general policy.
That's correct. And we do have it in the code as well, but now we also have the policy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I did have one question. I think this probably goes for county council. There's a section on reporting procedures, I believe on page 4 of the document, that outlines the protections people have for coming forward with fraud reports. I want to make sure that we are as comprehensive as all statutes and court rulings on basically whistleblowers' protection. And do you feel that this is comprehensive in that regard, or is this short of the existing legal standard mark for that protection?
I read it as being very comprehensive protection for a whistleblower, but David Sirius is in the room. I think he worked on this with Francine, maybe has further comments, but I think it's a very thorough protection for, and encourages people to report allegations of fraud.
I believe it's very comprehensive, and we followed the guidelines. But go ahead.
I haven't read it in a long time.
I read it this morning, and I thought it was...
I know the law has been evolving on this, and this is why I'm asking the question.
This is anything more comprehensive. You would essentially be rewriting the labor code whistleblower statute. You'd be rewriting the government code statute. So all those statutes are very comprehensive. They do apply to public agencies. This is basically just an internal protocol to facilitate from getting from A to B. So I think it's quite acceptable.
All right, thank you.
Further discussion by board members. Any comments from the public?
I'm sorry.
I have a couple of concerns I'd like to. My name is Reyes, Rancho Calaveras. First of all, we've been out of compliance in this state. But I have two. One of them is jumps out at me as far as making it a problem and disclosing confidential proprietary information. And inside. Now, you asking the sheriff department and legal counsel to investigate. What if the legal counsel has made, or somebody in the legal counsel department have said or done something that's not quite legit? I would like to, you might want to consider to include the district attorney, who also had the legal power to do something about it. Because I know you're all striving for an open and transparent administration. But it would be nice to know for the public that we do practice checks and balances. If one of your staff, your administration screws up and costs the county a whole bunch of money, it would be nice if some other agency can take action regarding that. So I would like to bring it to your attention, because right now, in past activities, what are you going to do? The legal counsel going to... Do you really believe they're going to do action against their own staff? The legal counsel is in your behalf. The district attorney is in a public half. Include the DA. They have the legal means and knowledge. What the sheriff department, any cooperation of you folks and your staff to make sure it's all clear and open and transparent. Thank you.
Any other comments on item 4? Chair open for a motion.
I motion to accept the FOD policy as written, although I would like to see the comments that Mr. Race addressed included in there, so that we can have the district attorney involved in the process if necessary as a check and balance. I think that that's appropriate.
Are you proposing to revise and amend this to the line of the DA would be included if another department was conflicted in the transaction?
Yes. That's for transparency and openness.
So that would be an amendment?
Is there a reason that the district attorney office is not included?
No, I mean, we use the district attorney's office, but just for standard protocol, I mean, I think we have the checks and balances in place, but if you'd like to add that extra layer, we can add that to the policy, so there's further protection.
I would just point out that some of this doesn't come within the DA's authority.
Okay.
There may be allegations of non-criminal fraud. So I think before you make the change, the DA would have to consent to be part of the process.
Yeah, I don't know legally.
And I'm not suggesting
what
that
any
you don't make the change,
implications.
but I think that before you approve it, with the change, we bring the DA into the discussion, make sure they're agreeable.
We can do that and work with counsel and the DA, work through that issue, and if it's appropriate, then we'll go ahead and amend the policy if that's
Right.
the
So
board's direction.
could we act on this today as it is, hold the amendment for discussion pending the DA's reaction for the next meeting?
I don't know if I feel comfortable approving it as is, because then any addendum later on you're not holding up the document for that amendment. I'd like for the owner, the onus to be on us to have the amendment attached to it so that it's approved at such time when they're both brought together.
It would just be incorporated. You continue it and you won't incorporate it.
Okay,
It
sure.
won't be an amendment.
Whatever.
So saying, is there any reason this couldn't wait till the meeting in June?
No, that would be fine. We did let CalEMA know that we were bringing the policy to the board today and that we would have it in place. So we can send them further notification that it's back on the agenda with a possible revision in early June.
The other is maybe we could talk to the district attorney this morning and hold this off till later,
Why not just continue it 2 weeks? Bring it back.
because she's already told CalEMA, it's another call to CalEMA, and if the DA agrees.
Well, I don't like the idea that people call and tell them they're going to have something approved before it even comes for a vote. I don't necessarily like that idea. You call in somebody and tell them, we're going to have it for you today. That's assuming it's going to be approved.
No, we-
If we're avoiding public comment, that doesn't sit well with me at all.
I think people
I think you
misunderstood what Francine told us.
Yes, thank
Well, the way that Marita's portraying it is that she'd already told us.
What I heard from Francine was that she had told the agency that we were going to consider it today.
That's right.
And that's exactly what we're doing.
Yes.
So
They wanted a plan of action.
If you want to change it,
And so-
why don't you just make a 2-week continuance motion?
I make a motion for a 2-week continuance.
And to incorporate the changes when it comes back.
To incorporate the changes when it comes back.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I will second that motion, understanding that the changes we're talking about is the request for the DA to enter in the event of conflict, and if the DA says no to that, it comes back in the current.
Okay, I have a motion by Supervisor Spellman, a second by Supervisor Walensky. Is there further board discussion? All in favor, so indicate by stating aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes on a 5-0 vote of the board. We'll move forward to item 6, a resolution amending resolution
Thank you.
1-7 to include a revised Exhibit A. Peter, you pull this, would you please come forward?
Mayor Race, Mr. Calaveras, for the past about a year, I've been asking what the county's policy is as far as fluorescent bulbs are. And I know for a good reason you folks don't answer it. And the impression is that Public Works does not have any policy taking, in case of an accident, these fluorescent bulbs. Now you're expecting $180,000 to retrofit public buildings. And I know how much you're concerned about mercury and environment and etc., which I greatly appreciate and support you on it. But right now, this public entity has no policy. How are you going to handle these fluorescent bulbs? Because in the first 5 minutes of any accidents, they're well proven that a tremendous amount of mercury is going to go up in the air, both in private home and in public places, for the safety of your employees and your constituents. Because you are committing to yourself disregarding the health and welfare of your constituents and your employees and yourself. And right now today you got a whole bunch of youngsters in here. I know you're concerned about the mercury, and I agree with you, it's very important. Well, let's get real, folks. You have a very dangerous product in the community that you're pushing. So please, consider it. I know $180,000 is very tempting to get us a grant, but you are exposing your constituents, your employees, and youngsters. How are you going to handle an accident? Nobody has stated yet. Okay, public boards are very quiet on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't think that's really the issue before us at this point in time, but that's an issue that needs to be addressed. So is there further board discussion on this matter? Yeah. Okay.
In the year 2009, when I was at Calaveras High School, we had an individual come and do a presentation to the Earth Club there, and at that point, he was part of a technology that was at the forefront of lighting, and that was something that we're now seeing available commercially today. You can buy one at Lowe's or Home Depot, but 2 years ago you could not, and that is an LED bulb. The bulbs that Mr. Race is talking about are compact fluorescent, the little squiggly ones, and they do have mercury, and it's cause for concern for people, especially in the public area. The LED bulbs that they have that are now available commercially have absolute none of those problems. It's basically like a little wafer, like it looks like a computer, like a silicon chip. There's no moving parts, there's no filament, there's none of that. The cost is a little bit greater than the CFL because it's newer technology, but I would encourage, for the sake of safety and the sake of long range, the LED bulb with the little chip, that thing will last longer than everybody in here. Everybody in this room will be dead before the LED gives out, because it's basically like a computer chip that just heats and cools with the lighting. It has no impact whatsoever on the environment in the event of an accident or something like that. So to the extent that we can, for some of the bulbs that are really high up in the ceiling or different places like that we don't want to change very often, as budget allows, I think we should look to use those LED light bulbs in place of the CFLs if we can.
Okay. Any other board comments? Any other public comments? Chair will entertain a motion of approval on items.
Would you like Zacharias?
I'm sorry, I don't have any comments. I'm just here to answer any questions. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Have LED bulbs been considered? I mean, I know that it's not set in stone. It says compact gas, but has there been any discussion about the ability to use the LEDs?
I don't recall seeing them on the approved lights for the grant itself. The majority of the lights that we are changing are in fact the 2, 4, and 8-foot fluorescent tubes, not the small lights. That's the majority of what we have.
I would suspect that would be the case, but I do see it does call out for even the screw-in ones, which are the squiggly, and you could use the LEDs on those.
We have to stick to the what the grant has listed as the appropriate lights.
You said you weren't sure though if that was.
I don't recall seeing any LEDs listed on that list.
My question was along the lines of the issue that Mr. Reyes raised, which is I don't believe we need a county policy to have a procedure that complies with the requirements to handle these things in a safe manner, and there's a prescribed process. Is this county aware of those processes and ready to comply with them?
Yes, in fact we are. It is actually part of the grant and part of the bid process that the contractor who bids on it will follow the state-approved program for dealing with bulbs that break and the disposal of the bulbs when they're pulled out. It's fairly inclusive. It doesn't look like any fun, but it's pretty set out. It's a 10-page document that the state has provided.
Speaking of contractors, that brings to mind I received some email about this particular agenda item and wondering, what we can do to get local contractors involved in doing the work. I mean, this doesn't seem like it's something that's highly technical. I don't know if we're going to have if we have staff here at the county that are going to perform the duties, or if we're going to hire someone. If we are,
this will be bid out, and there are at least 2 local contractors that have already talked to me about it. One of them won the bid in Tuolumne County. He's a local Calaveras contractor, and I suspect he will be bidding on this also.
That's good to hear.
Yes.
The local contractor, the desire of this board to do business with local contractors wherever feasible and possible, and to give every advantage, every legal advantage to local economies, has been much discussed. I'm interested in what we can do about this in relation to this particular transaction, or as a general county policy to strengthen our commitment to that to do something about that desire in a more effective way than we have been up to this point. Do you have any suggestions for us on that?
I don't at this time. It is one of those things I would love to look into, and I will do so.
Are there parameters on the grant?
There are, because this is our funds coming from the state, coming to the county. There are requirements. I don't believe that we can use our 3% local contractor on this one.
So this will be handled through federal bidding procedures that are sort of superimposed goes with the money.
There will be Public Works contracting, which typically does not allow us to use our 3%.
All right. Well, I would like to take a look at all possibilities, because it comes up every time we have a contract. It'd be nice to know what our legal possibilities are, and give us an opportunity to take advantage wherever there is a legal moment for us.
When do you expect this to go out to bid?
Late June, after budget hearings.
And the work will commence in July, September, or August?
Probably September or October. And it has to be done by March, but our county is fairly small. It doesn't seem to be an issue, the timeline.
It was open for a motion on item 6. No, excuse me. Is it item 6 we're on?
Yes.
No, you're right.
It is 6.
Zachariah, isn't this the one where we had that study done and it came through and they did all the facilities, including the Calaveras High School and everything, and we had workshops on this, public workshops. This is the same one, isn't it?
This is the Noresco.
Yes, the Noresco one, thank you. And this was sponsored by Calaveras Public Power Agency for its member agencies.
I'd be happy to make the motion, but I'd like to mention that the motion is to add simply the buildings that we, although our discussion is that we're adding the buildings where this work will take place to the original proposal as demanded by the Energy Commission.
That's correct. They've awarded us the grant, but to actually receive any of the funds, we have to add the listed buildings.
I have a motion to approve item 6 as presented. Do I have a second?
Wait, my house isn't on here.
You're lucky if it isn't.
I'll make a second.
Okay, I have a motion by Supervisor Walensky, a second by Supervisor Spellman. Do I have any further board discussion? All in favor, so indicate by stating aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes on a 5-0 vote of the board. We'll move forward to item 7, a resolution to enter into an annual operating and financial plan for control and narcotics operations with the United States Forest Service. Al, what burning issue do we have here this morning?
We may not have a burning issue, but then again we may. Al Segal, Calaveras County Taxpayer Association. The question I have in dealing with financial matters with the federal government is this. Since the federal government is bankrupt, we have to be careful to not encourage them to do more harm to themselves. So what I'd like to ask the question, what is the financial, what kind of money is involved? Who's paying for it? Is it a grant? Is it something else? And what's the burden on our Calaveras County taxpayers?
I believe I can answer that. This calls for the Forest Service to reimburse with federal funds local costs of $7,650 for duties associated with patrol in national forests, and up to $5,000 for controlled substance removal, for a total of $12,650. That's what's before us here. It's costs that we've incurred but have not been reimbursed for sometimes in the past, and this allows us to do this work and at least get a local reimbursement for it. And $12,650 is not likely to send the federal government into any worse money. Yes,
Okay, any more comments?
I do.
Oh, go ahead, Gary.
I just have one comment as the form of amendment to this. On the back on the signature page, it lists Gary Coops as the coroner. Can we amend that to just say sheriff, please?
I believe I have that changed.
Do you have it changed already?
Yeah, I think there's...
The one I have
This
lists...
morning.
Okay.
It is true that previous sheriffs have wanted to take that operation under their domain. So.
Okay, Dan, what do you have?
I just wanted to make a comment for Al and anybody else that may be interested in part of the parameters of that. One of the things that we're falling into trouble with these days is people that are using government forest lands to produce illegal drugs. One of the things that the non-citizen drug-growing cartel does is they go into the forest areas and they set up a drip line in the springtime to grow things that they can sell on a black market, and it's becoming a very large problem. So I'm surprised that there isn't more money for this because from what I understand, there's a big problem with it. Not necessarily in our area, and we hope that it stays that way. But there are other areas where they have intense issues with these things, especially up north where there's national park lands or forest areas that don't get frequented as much. Because of our proximity to the San Francisco Bay Area, even though we do have some remote locations in our national forests, there are a lot of people that backpack and hike and do other outdoor activities, so it's not as likely that people would set up a type of thing like that because it's more likely that they'd be found. But nevertheless, I'm glad that the government sees this as a problem, that they're delegating at least some expenditure to help take care of this, because that is a problem. I mean, the drug growing illegally and specifically the chemicals that they use to create a quick growing season because of the altitude, by the time the snow melts off until the wintertime starts again, Sometimes there's as little as a 4-month window, so they use really harsh chemicals to get the plants to grow very fast. So it causes a problem with the environment. It also causes a problem for the end user. People who buy and use those drugs that are grown with those harsh chemicals are ingesting those harsh chemicals unbeknownst to them, most likely. So it's a huge problem. So I'm glad that I see this, that we're getting some funding to make sure that our area doesn't become the next expansion area for these operations.
Tom Liberty, Calaveras Patient Resources, Mountain Ranch. Actually, I'm sorry, Collective Patient Resources. I forgot we changed our name. I just wanted to say that we very much support the eradication of these big illegal grows, and I'm glad you touched on the environmental impact, because they're tearing the forest up out there. So even though the people that I work with aren't very excited about the position the federal government has taken on medical marijuana, we're all very united in the idea that these big illegal grows need to be taken care of, and the land needs to be protected. It would also be great if at some point, I know this is a fantasy, but if at some point when they do get out there and they find that medicine, if that medicine could somehow be diverted to the terminally ill and cancer patients, that would be a really great program to get started. Thanks.
Depending on if they find that they're using harsh chemicals, that might not be a...
Okay, are there other board comments? Chair is open for a motion.
So moved.
Second with the amendments as previously discussed.
What was the amendment again?
The change the corner.
Well, I'm not for that. I have a motion by Supervisor Tofinelli. I have a second by Supervisor Walensky. Any further board discussion? I'll just give you my 2 cents worth. To me, this is absolute insanity what we have for a marijuana policy in the country. We should legalize it, allow people, farmers to grow it and harvest it. If people wish to consume it, let them consume it. All we're doing is giving another product to the drug cartels in Mexico to import it. I mean, either we grow it here or we import it. If we import it through the drug cartels and other illegal organizations that make hundreds of millions of dollars to just undermine the governments in their country and to increase the level of violence in their country. And all you have to do is pick up the newspaper and read about Mexico. And all that is being produced for the consumption in the United States. And quite frankly, nobody produces anything except for consumption. It's consumption that drives all economic production, and yet they're bearing the brunt in Mexico for our consumption in the United States. It makes absolutely no sense at all. It's just like, well, what can we do to fund drug cartels? And basically that's all we're doing, and that's the same thing we're doing worldwide whenever governments try to eradicate illicit drugs, particularly through farming, at the farming level, whether it be in Afghanistan or Mexico or wherever, whether you're importing into China, importing into the United States, importing into whatever the consumptive body is that pays for and rewards people for those types of activities. So it makes absolutely no sense at all to me, but the fact of the matter is it is illegal. We have to provide the law enforcement, and we should be compensated for that as being we're required under the law to do so. So I will support the motion. Further discussion?
Just wanted to mark the close of the most global consent calendar yet. We've taken every small issue and given it its full context.
There you go. All in favor, so indicate by stating aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes on a 5-0 vote of the Board of Supervisors. My God, we're through with the consent agenda.
Tom, you're getting religious on us.
Yeah, now we'll go to the regular agenda and we'll just zip right through it without any questions at all.
Before we go to public, should be a good moment and not overly global.
With the consent of the board, I'd like to take item 9 prior to public comment, which is a resolution recognizing the Calaveras High School 2011.
It's item 11, Tom.
It's been
that there
moved to
was-
11. Christ almighty, what am I on the wrong? I don't even have the right, what did I do with my glasses?
You're on the wrong agenda.
We're actually going to get to you.
Okay. Item 11, I'm going to move that forward with the consent of the board prior to public comments. A resolution recognizing the Calaveras High School 2011 varsity girls soccer team as the Mother Lowe League champions. And this is being brought by Gary Tofinelli. So, Gary, if you would like to wave the flag, why?
Well, I won't wave the flag because I don't have a Calaveras High flag. If I did, I would be waving it. Does anybody bring one? On this item, I received a couple of emails on requesting that I do this. And is the whole team here this morning? Almost all. Why don't you come on up?
Come on.
Come on all the way up here. Come on up here.
If I can interject something in this, I just want to bring it to the board's attention that this is the first time in the history of Calaveras High School that the girls have won the soccer title for the league.
You're on television now.
Not only did they win the league title this year for their high school, but they also took their team to the section finals that they just played in on Saturday. It's kind of like a Northern California title for the state, if you will, for their size school. However, they didn't win. They got beat by West Campus out of Sacramento. So, but anyways, they were runner-up in the section finals, so it's quite an accomplishment for these girls.
I have a resolution here. Is Angela the coach? First year. This is her first year as coach. I'd like to read it, and then I will present one to each member and to the coach, and then I have one for the school if they want to display it. And then I'll give, the rest of the team's not here, I'll give them to you and make sure they get their copies of the resolution. Okay? So the resolution recognizing the Calaveras High School varsity girls soccer team as the 2011 Mother Lowe League champion. It says, whereas the Calaveras High School varsity girls soccer team had a winning season with an overall record of 15, 5, and 6, and a league record of 8, 2, and 5. I don't know if that record included your section or not. What was your overall including the section? You know? 17, 6, and 6. Fantastic. Bunch of winners here. Whereas Angela Jarvis, in her first year as head coach, worked with the girls to make school history by playing a first-time Mother Lowe League soccer championship. But I don't know, I tried to find out, I talked to Rick Stills, the principal, to find out how long the soccer program has been in existence at Calaveras High School, but I didn't get an answer. So I'm hoping that it's more than 25 years.
Yeah, the person that asked is Miss Yelovich. She actually started the soccer program.
Is she?
Yeah, she's been
13 years, about 13 years existence. I'm going to name, it has the names of all the players here, so if I chop up your names, please excuse me. Okay. Whereas the players representing the 2011 team is Christy Jacobson, Chelsea Teixeira, Katie Vernon, Leslie Valdez, Deanna Brighton, Cecilia Beza, Stephanie Freitas, Jessica Johnson, Alyssa White, Megan Fox, Jody Lovegren, Jessica Carter, Morgan Colburn, Madison Cox, Cassie Beadle, Tiffany Mercedes Ball, Audrey Carter, along with the statisticians and the team's manager, Alexis Kohler, Sarah Hand, and Elena Campbell should be commended for their teamwork. And whereas the dedication, commitment, and camaraderie exemplified by these girls serves as an example to us all of what can be achieved in working together. And now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Supervisors that the 2011 Calaveras High School Varsity Girls Soccer Team be honored for their endeavors and dedication on behalf of their school. On a motion by Supervisor Topovelli.
And second by Steve Walensky.
And seconded by Steve Walensky. Supervisor Gene Walensky. The foregoing resolution was duly passed and adopted by the Board of Supervisors.
We haven't voted yet.
We all in favor?
No.
Questions here? Discussion of Okay, are there any board comments or questions?
Yes, I do. My understanding is that you all beat Red Heart High School to get here. I have a
excuse me. Go ahead.
This is really hard for me to support this. I'm a Bret Hart follower, so I guess I'll have to challenge Bret Hart to be in this room next year. So with that caveat, I will support this. I'm really choking. Supervisor Tryon.
Well, I have a question, Gary. I have to know if any of these young ladies are a member of the Calaveras High School Earth Club.
I was last year.
Not a problem.
What do you have?
I just wanted to mention that 12 years ago, I had a daughter play on this team. It was just beginning, and they lost just about every game. 10 years later, I had another daughter, Hannah, who played on before being injured out there in the field, and they lost nearly every game. So what you've done is overcome a rich tradition of losing to get to this moment, and I want to thank you for vindicating their efforts early on.
Any other comments? There.
I just wanted to make notice that at least 4 of the girls here I can remember I had as students at Calaveras High School. And one of the things that we try to accomplish in education is to have well-rounded individuals heading out when they graduate with that diploma in their hand. One of the things that makes them a person as a whole is being involved in other activities. Academics is certainly where we would hope that they excel at, but sports is one way that they can become a whole person, and it teaches them to manage their time. It teaches them to be physically active, sportsmanship, those type of things that will carry over to make them the type of adults and citizens that are shining examples in our community. And I'm very, very, very proud of them. And I want to say that I have a picture saved on my computer from a Calaveras Enterprise article, I think. Is Brianna here? I don't know who shot the picture, but it's a picture of where it was taken one of the last games of the season when they were going into the playoffs, where they beat Somerville in the snow. These girls played in the snow. Okay? Now, if that isn't dedication, I don't know what is. Taking a risk of being kicked in the shins in the snow. I mean, I never went out for soccer because I played when I was young and I got kicked in the shins and I said, forget that. I don't do that anymore. I went into other things, but I mean, to have that game and near the end of the season in the snow and still playing on and winning that game as part of the record, I mean, that's outstanding. So I congratulate you all on your successful season.
Thank you.
Hope to see you on the
vote.
Should we do a roll call vote? I think we should do a roll call vote, so it's everybody's of record. With the clerk,
So the part of the thing,
conduct a roll call vote.
Supervisor Tofinelli?
Yes.
Supervisor Walensky?
Aye.
Supervisor Callaway?
Okay, yes.
Supervisor Spellman?
Yes.
And Sheriff Tyler?
Aye. Congratulations, ladies.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Congratulations.
Yeah, but it was all,
It was hard.
the objections were fraudulent.
Handwriting is a little shady. It was blind when she signed it. Congratulations. Oh, that's from the snow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That completes item 9. We'll then go back to item 8, public comments. 5 minutes per person. Comments shall be limited to items of interest to the public that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. I'll also...
Here.
10, excuse me, I'm on the wrong. 10. Item 10, public comments. I also announce at this time that on the regular agenda, if there are going to be public comments on regular agenda items other than public comments, those comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Thank you. Would you take mine one away? Now I don't have any names. I don't forget everybody's name.
Strumming to a different beat.
I see that.
Good morning, Marty Crane. Thank you for moving the students up. Happy thing coming next Saturday, Valley Springs. I've given you all a little pocket stuffer. It's the Blues Music Festival is coming to Valley Springs on Saturday. I have tickets. Surprisingly, they are only $10 a piece. Very affordable. And you just bring a lawn chair, sit back, and enjoy 3 live bands, food, vendors, and the well-known Calaveras community excitement. You can go to Valley Springs, spelled out, valleyspringsmusic.org, to see and hear samples of the bands. It's at the Valley Springs Terrace Center at Highway 26 in Vista Del Lago. It's on Saturday the 28th from 2 to 9 p.m. And it's a great opportunity to be part of a community building at its best. If you'd like to be a sponsor of the Blues Festival, a donation of $100 buys 12 tickets, which gives you a $20 savings. You could then use that to take a friend or use them for one of your employees or someone who is not generally able to go to these sort of things. This is brought to you by the Valley Springs Community Music and Arts Association, and the proceeds benefit the local youth of Calaveras. So, I have tickets. Don't be shy. And also that same morning, across the street is a classic car show. So there's something for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? If so, please come forward.
Good morning, Terry Hall, Chief Probation Officer. I just want to comment that Amador High School finished 3rd in the soccer season this year. Didn't want that to go without notice because I am an Amador High graduate, so I just wanted to touch on that. I also wanted to touch briefly on yesterday's U.S. Supreme Court ruling regarding overcrowding. I wanted to advise the board that in light of this, it comes at an interesting time because of AB 109, the realignment bill. And I just wanted to assure the board that the county is working towards a plan. We have a Community Corrections Partnership meeting scheduled for June 10th, I believe. And all the partners will be getting together on that day to discuss the plan for the realignment of these inmates from the state prison.
When is this?
It's meeting is June 10th.
I have an Administration of Justice Committee meeting next week. So if there's some thoughts, because I know we'll be discussing this, it's with California State Association of Counties. If there's some...
I'm going to try to attend that same meeting.
You can let me know, because I'm assuming we're going to be discussing this. The agenda came out. We did our agenda review on that prior to the Supreme Court ruling.
Right. And just to let you know, this AB 109 has been written to align itself with SB 678. And if you remember in 2009, the SB 678 is the Community Corrections Performance Incentive Act. And that's when probation was given the task of decreasing the prison recommendations and revocations of probation to interstate prison system. And just so you know, in Calaveras, in 2007, we had 61 people that went to state prison. 2008, there was 76. 2009, there was 58. And 2010, we decreased it to 44. And in light of that, there is funding that comes back to the county as a result of those decreased numbers. The original amount coming back to Calaveras this year was going to be $214,000, and due to our substantial decrease in 2010, they have upped that by $155,000. So the total coming back to probation is $369,000 this year, which will help offset any VLF loss that we're looking at. So we're going to keep going in that direction. Alternative sentencing has, we're going to make a nice presentation to the board in June to explain where we are now. We left here in June last year, gave you 5 goals that we had, and we're going to start out and explain where we're at. Any questions?
The chief probation officers and the California State Sheriff's Association, are they aligned on, do you know yet, on the Supreme Court ruling? Or we were anticipating this anyway.
The chief probation officers are in line with this ruling. We actually submitted a letter yesterday regarding the position of the chief probation officers, and basically that is to keep going in the direction we're going because we do support it. I can't speak for the Sheriff's Association at this time on yesterday's ruling. I don't know where they stand.
Okay, thank you.
One question here. The 10th, it's great that people are getting together on the 10th, but we also have potentially extended budget hearings on that date. I'm hoping you can find a way to make sure that the partners relating to that can circulate in if necessary.
I've had some RSVPs from the critical partners. That day is only going to be a small window of time to explain what we're doing.
Oh, okay.
We're not going to really move forward.
Not an all-day.
No, it's only going to be a 30-minute window of time to actually just introduce what our plan for this committee will be.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Anything else?
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? If so, please come forward.
I thought Dana had a question.
David Tuno, Rancho Calaveras. A couple things. One of them just came up this morning. I would encourage the board to, at some point in the near future, to put on the agenda, or at least up for discussion, on the agenda, the issue of evening meetings. For one thing, those young ladies that were just here wouldn't have to cut class to be here. So I think that's an issue that the public would appreciate, and it would be important for public input to have that back, to have evening meetings.
They got an education in government.
Did they get education? I heard applause. I didn't hear education, but that's fine. I mean, congratulations to them. It just reminded me that when I was thinking, gosh, they're missing a lot of class too. So a lot of people have to miss work to be here. It would open it up a lot. It would mean a lot to the county. I'm really here to talk about everybody's favorite subject, the housing element. because of comments that were made last week after the public comments section that I couldn't respond to, that raised questions in my mind that I wanted to bring up today. My understanding, and this is, I guess it was a misunderstanding, so I would like to be informed on this, that a year ago, with the adoption, and adoption might be the wrong word, of the housing element as a component of the general plan. My understanding was that since the general plan itself had yet to be adopted, it's coming up for discussion soon, I believe, that the housing element was then dormant until the general plan, here I see the nods, and that's my issue, that until the general plan is adopted, the housing element is not, meaning that from last year to whenever the plan is adopted, the element is open for review, amendments. To it, Mr. Tryon's question that we discussed last week, I won't repeat it, that could be answered. Mr. Tofanelli's issue with the zoning snafu that he said he was dead against last year. So I believed that those issues could be addressed during the course of the year, amendments could be made, and that was the reason for those issues being brought up then, because if the housing element is adopted and it's in stone, then that makes Mr. Tryon's question moot, and it makes Mr. Tofanelli's issue moot, which I didn't believe they were. So inform me about that, clarify that for me if you would please. You don't have to do it right now, but after I sit down if you want to, unless you want to have an interaction. So those were important issues brought up by both gentlemen, and my understanding was that the housing element was not carved in stone, but I understand now from last week that you're moving ahead with it, various provisions of it. So that's my confusion. I would like some clarification. Lastly, in support of the element, Mr. Walensky made a comment about a big government program, how successful a big government program was. You brought up the Highway Act of the Eisenhower administration, which is actually called the Interstate Highway Act, 1956. And I feel compelled to comment about that because you used that as an example of how big government can do big things for the good of everybody. But the act itself was not actually done for altruistic purposes. It was done to line the pockets of a great many very large industrialists in the construction industry, oil, and automotive, which it did. It also produced the most inefficient transportation system of any industrialized nation. That's us. It also led directly to a number of things that I believe you're probably against. Urban sprawl, inner city blight, dependence upon the automobile, and therefore oil, and therefore foreign oil, and all that that implies, and all the air pollution that goes with it. And even one of your favorite programs, Agenda 21 from the UN, which was aimed directly at the United States because of the effects of the Highway Act on the urban planning of the United States. So there's some good reading on this subject if you really want to know. 3 books that I can recommend, which I've read. The Road to Ruin by, having trouble reading my own writing here because I forgot my glasses, Mowbray. Superhighway Super Hoax by Leavitt, Leavitt, and The Geography of Nowhere, particularly good one, by James Kunstler. So I'm suggesting that before you use a big government program, tout a big government program to support another government program, you might want to do a little reading, just in case somebody out here has. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comments? If so, please come forward.
Good morning, Rosemary Wilson from McCallum Hill. Just wanted to follow up on the previous speaker when he spoke about the possibility of you putting it on the agenda that there be an evening meeting of the Board of Supervisors. As I recall, maybe earlier this year or later last year, when you were reviewing, I think that the item agenda came up as reviewing the format of the actual agenda of the Board of Supervisors meetings. It was discussed then, and there was quite a bit of discussion that how various members of the community would benefit from having the occasional or maybe regular meetings in the evening. And so I don't really see any need to bring it up as a new item if it's already been discussed by the board some months ago. So perhaps it would be good to for the Board of Supervisors to give a progress report on what they actually decided to do. I believe you were going to be looking into staging the meetings at a different time to accommodate people who couldn't normally attend during the day. Thank you.
Are there any other public comments? If so, please come forward. Al Segano, Taxpayer Association. I appreciate David's comments because we concur 100% with what he said, though I'm not so sure that the highway system is hurtful to the United States because it provides better commerce. And but one of the things of concern is the housing element. And early on, it was requested from county staff to identify those things that are actually required by state law or CEQA, and those things that were not. So you could decide how extensive you're going to be. And I think that the taxpayers would really like to know specifically what items that are on the approved housing element are not required by the state. Thank you. Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'll close public comments. That completes item 10, if I'm on the right agenda. We'll move forward then to item 12, a minute order authorizing a refund of road impact mitigation fees in the amount of $36,568 to Black Creek Ranch LLC. This has been continued from our May 10th, 2011 meeting. It's a Public Works item. I think we sent it over to County Council to get a comment. So County Council, would you like to give us your comment?
Sure. This item was on the agenda as a routine reimbursement of room fee deposit. And the question came up, essentially, could the county hold the funds and reimburse the county for property tax payments that were in arrears on the property. So I was asked to research that. The county's room fee ordinance, which is based on the Mitigation Fee Act, both our ordinance and the state law provide that where the building permit elapses, the room fees on deposit shall, and we use that word, shall be refunded to the developer. So the law makes it very clear that the funds are the property of the developer. The question is, can the county essentially seize that money? And the answer is no. The general rule on property tax about a case, it's Garcia versus the County of Santa Clara, a 1978 decision, describes or states the rule as follows. The general principles that apply to property taxes in California are that they are imposed on the ownership of property as such. No personal liability arises from their non-payment. The sole security for the taxes being the property itself. So I believe it's clear that where property is on the secured tax roll, as this is, the property is the only source of payment of of the funds. And that's the scheme that we have in California. There are exceptions. There is at least one exception to this rule that under certain circumstances, which I don't believe apply here, but to pursue that would involve litigation and a further discussion, and I'm not recommending it, but if the board wants to explore that, I'd recommend a closed session discussion of that option. But as I said, I don't believe those conditions apply here. So
I would like to pursue it.
Okay, is there more discussion?
Darren? Yes. What county council has researched, I'm sure, is accurate. The quote was, "Can the county seize the money?" The answer was no. I would submit to you that it would be inappropriate for us to seize the money, as in cash the check, spend the money, etc. However, holding the money does not constitute seizing until such time that we can come to an arrangement with the people who owe us the money. Seeing that they owe us $147,000 in another arena, it might not be that we can subtract. It's not that easy. However, I've looked at the list of the people in the bankruptcy filing, and it's about as long as my leg. And some people, they're into it for millions and millions of dollars. So the idea that we have a legal right to attach their property as collateral for that $147,000, there is not a chance in a snowball's chance that we're ever going to get that $147,000 based on holding their property as collateral, looking at the list of people who are named as creditors in their bankruptcy. So, my understanding on this is that if we get away from the terminology of seizing and rather say that we're holding till such a time that they work these things out, that we could put off taking $36,000 out of our money that we have when we have extremely tight budget right now to refund to somebody that owes us $147,000. And I would like to explore this to the very end of the possibilities before I would feel comfortable, which I would submit to you that would never happen, that I would feel comfortable, but until such a time that we know that all remedies are exhausted, for us to not refund this $36,000 to somebody that owes us $147,000. So, if we need to do a closed session on it, I would make a motion that we do that.
I'm happy to do the closed session. I would just point out that, and pushing my expertise to the limit, but I don't think that the bankruptcy will discharge the lien on the property. So I think the property does stand as good security for the tax obligation, notwithstanding the bankruptcy.
And we're in first place over other creditors?
The bankruptcy just doesn't discharge
the property tax.
Tax on the property itself, no matter who.
It's always the first lien.
Yes.
Yeah, we're always, that's what I thought.
Yeah, it's always the first lien.
Also, rent fees aren't part of our budget. That's a separate account. That's used for.
Yeah, I think the rent fees are held in an account that we could not use.
Yeah, that's a trust account.
That's a trust account for.
We don't get the interest and we can't use the money.
Well, there's things you can use it for. There's other projects that you could offset the rim or, make adjustments or things like that. It's not just like it's going from thin air. It could be used for something to help further our county. Well, with rim fees. You guys, this board.
Be used for rim fee projects.
Yeah, this board unanimously approved $10,000 discount in rim fees for the new Veterans Hall in Valley Springs. That was a 5-0 vote by this board. That's $10,000 that they basically granted to the veterans in Valley Springs that they should have had to pay in rim fees, but they didn't. So this $36,000, if you're willing to give it away, whether it comes from the general fund or not, it could be used for something better than giving back to somebody who owes us much more in bankruptcy. So I'd like to see this pursued to the point where we know absolutely without a doubt that it's the only remedy.
Well, the rim fees, you can't just use it on a rim project unless the project has proceeded. The rim fees are a mitigation. If there's nothing to mitigate because the project did not go forward, then you have to return the money. You can't use it to mitigate something when there's nothing to mitigate against. So, Steve?
I just had a question on finances. Let's just hypothesize that we pass the what was called a motion a minute ago and decide that we want to litigate this. I know that the details have to be discussed in closed session, but one of the details that might be important for the public to be aware of is to get $36,000, what would the cost of the litigation? You've already said that you don't think the conditions exist for it, but let's just say the rest of us decided the conditions were. What's the type of cost that would be incurred by the county to go fetch the 36? What are the parameters that you would imagine if this was to go to court?
They don't spend money to litigate to get it from us.
Well, the problem is the conditions that would require. We could file a lawsuit. There are the conditions which I think do need to be discussed in closed session. If they were present, if they existed, there would be, I think, a fairly inexpensive lawsuit to pursue. In all honesty, so that's the answer to your question. The issue here is this money is the property of the developer. We happen to have it in our custody and know where it is, but it could be in a local bank, it could be in any other form. And what we really need to do is go to court, get a judgment, and attach that property, whether we hold it or somebody else holds it. So that would be the process that would be followed. Would have to be followed in order to hold on to this money or go after any other asset of the property. But I think the fundamental question is this fee is the property of the developer.
I need to make a statement in regards to that question, that line of questioning to County Council. County Council answered correctly to Mr. Walensky's question. However, Mr. Walensky stated the question as in that we were the pursuer, that we would have to pay to go fetch it. We don't have to fetch it. We already own it. We have it. They would have to bring litigation against us, against the county, to fetch it. So we are in the driver's seat here. They would have to actually, the onus would be on them to get to hire counsel to come fetch it from us because we possess this time. And the second point is, in terms of road mitigation fees, Copperopolis is still the district is part of the district that I represent at this point in time. One of the things that's very important to them and important to me is that at some time in the history of their community, they will have a brick and mortar library in their town. This particular property in question, which is owed $147,000 in taxes, is located on Copper Cove Drive, which is one of the main arteries in Copperopolis. Now, if it was that this went to the full extent in the courts and we received ownership of that property through the bankruptcy process, which you made mention or referred to earlier, these REM fees that we have that were uncollected quite possibly could be used to mitigate the library that could be built on that property if the county were to take possession of it. So just to give these REM fees away when they could be used to mitigate the road issue if the county were to acquire that property and the Friends of the Library in Copper were to be able to build a brick and mortar on that if the county granted them access to that property, we need to pursue this again to the nth to make sure that there is not something that we can do to keep these dollars in our county when there's somebody who owes us an extensive amount of money more than what we owe them. And I do not believe that they're going to pay any legal counsel to come and try to fetch from us $36,000. For the same reason you're talking about, they'd have to pay $30,000 to get the $30,000. They're not going to come after us to get it. Just as we made an assertion to the fair that if they didn't pay us the money, that we were going to bring a lawsuit against them for money owed. And they told us to pound sand because they know that it's not a winning battle. We're not going to put out that kind of money to go try to fetch $20,000. And these people, if they're smart, are not going to put out $30,000 to get 36. It's just the way it goes. So we don't have to fetch anything. They have to fetch it from us. Until such time that we know that we absolutely have to, then I think we need to continue to pursue it and hold it. If we need a closed session to file it.
I have staff standing behind you. I need to have staff's comment first, and then we'll open it to the public.
Kelly Zana, New Public Works. I was just going to mention that the money is not returned back to an individual, it's returned back to the LLC. So I just want to make sure that was clear. We're not cutting a check to any individual.
Which is in bankruptcy.
Yes.
So it goes to the bankruptcy court.
Yes, and there was supposed to be a trustee sale today, which I believe is probably going to be canceled. So just to update you on that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other board comments? Okay, public comments. Al, would you please come forward?
I appreciate Supervisor Spellman's concern about the money being owed to county and the county having money. But I can agree with the county council, and I think taxpayers would agree with the county council on this, because this money was induced or taken from the developer to offset consequences of that development on the community, particularly roads. Road impact mitigation is for that purpose. And when the project no longer existed, then obviously that money is not supposed to be used for anything else. It should be returned to the developer. And another thing on taxes, if you fail to pay your taxes, according to the law, you have 5 years. And you incur penalties each year. It gets to be a pretty big bill. And at the end of 5 years, if you don't pay your taxes, then the property can go to tax sale. And the relationship between the value of the property and the amount of those taxes is usually quite broad. $100,000 tax bill could be involving maybe $1 million property. So the likelihood of liability for the county is very slight, and it's making quite a profit on the interest it's charging on these back-due taxes. There's an option, according to law, as I understand it, that any time during the 5 years, the person that owes the money can make an agreement with the county, and then they have to get current on that year's taxes, and then plus an amount they need to pay over the next 5 years to get complete recovery. But even that is kind of rough if the person is bankrupt or in serious financial problem. Certainly the intentions, I think, are right, but the principles were not quite correct on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Any other public comments? I'll close off public comments, bring this session back to the board. What's the direction of the board?
I guess I would ask the chair whether he has recognized is there a motion on the floor already or not, and is there a second?
Make a motion that we go into closed session to discuss this fully.
Is there a second to that motion?
Nobody wants a second to make sure that we don't lose. We're giving $36,000 of the county's money away to somebody who owes us $147 in bankruptcy, which we're never going to collect. No one wants to take a second and talk about it further. You're just going to give away people's money like that?
Is there a second? Okay, the motion dies for lack of a second. Is there another motion?
I move we authorize the refund of the road impact mitigation fee to the Rock Creek Branch LLC as requested by staff.
I have a motion by Supervisor Callaway. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I have a second by Supervisor Walensky. Is there further board discussion?
I'm going to be voting no because these people are being federally indicted. I know that for a fact, and there's no way that we should be giving this money back to them.
Okay, all in favor so indicate by stating aye. Aye. Opposed? No. It passes on a 4-1 vote with Supervisor Spellman in the negative. Thank you. And with that, I have to excuse myself, and I'll turn the gavel over to Gary.
It's not 10:30.
That's Cal Fire. You guys can handle Cal Fire.
Well, I'm glad you at least stayed for the fraud part of the agenda we had.
You guys are mean to me.
The next item we have is number 13. This is to adopt 2 resolutions approving, 1, the attached amendments to the cooperative agreement between the State of California, Department of Forestry and Fire Prevention, CAL FIRE, and the County of Calaveras executed on June 9, 2009 for dispatch services for the fiscal year 2009-10 in the amount of $206,803 and fiscal year 2010-11 in the amount of $215,548. And two, the attached 3-year agreement between CAL FIRE and the County of Calaveras for dispatch services for fiscal year 2011-12 through fiscal year 2013-14 in an amount not to exceed $767,781. This is brought to us by Administration. Department Head Jeannie Boyce is signed, but I see we have Shirley Ryan in front of us.
Good morning, Shirley Ryan, County Administrative Office. This is what you have before you is 2 resolutions. The first resolution, as read, was to approve 2 amendments, 1 and 2, to an agreement that was entered into by the board in CAL FIRE on June 9, 2009. Historically, CAL FIRE has provided emergency fire dispatch services for the county, and for that we are charged a portion of that. They normally come back on an annual basis to bring us the amendments to the 3-year contracts. Due to changes in the administration at CAL FIRE, there was a delay in getting that to us for fiscal years 9, 10, and 10, 11. Because the contract has a clause in it, we could continue with the contract under the initial year's amount for 9-10, which we did. Now that the contract is here, the balance due would be about $20,000. However, the final bill from CAL FIRE is actually in the neighborhood of $5,700. Also, the Second Amendment, is for the current year, 10-11, and that is included in the budget, as well as the difference between what was paid in 9-10 and what remains to be owed. So we have sufficient funds in the current year budget to cover the dispatch contract. Also attached is a 3-year agreement for the next 3 fiscal years, not to exceed $767,781. The first year is an actual number. The second 2 fiscal years are estimates. And we're actually billed based on actual cost. Division Chief Steve Hall is here from CAL FIRE. Should you have any additional questions for him, but I'll take any questions from the board initially.
Is there any questions from the board on this item?
Shirley, is it not to exceed still, is that a fixed number, even though there could be changes in the yearly for year 2 and 3?
That's my understanding. The cost for 11-12 is $231,958, and that's based on what they know. It looks like there's, to me, a 10% cost of living built into the year for 12-13 and 13-14, but that is an estimate. I checked with Chief Hollett, and he told me that, as usual, it would be based on actual year's cost.
So that isn't a fixed amount?
No, it's not to exceed.
It's one of the things I got.
Okay. So it's really it's an estimated not to exceed.
Right.
So should we modify the resolution to estimate it? Because not to exceed, I can hear us in year 3 saying, they want to, 770, and then we're going to spend 2 hours arguing about it and going to special meetings and so forth. So, I thought we should deal with that now.
Okay, maybe the best person to answer that is Chief Hollett. He can tell us whether he would expect it to go over that.
Morning, Steve Hollett, CAL FIRE. And that figure is won't go over that number there. We went high just to make sure we had it in the contract, but it's going to be actual cost for that.
Okay, so if there's a change, either because of volume of calls or because the cost of doing business has exceeded what is before us, the 767 is the maximum, no matter what other variables might happen to exceed that.
Yes, that's true, and that's stated in the contract.
Okay, I mean, I just don't want it to become an issue in year 3. That's where I'm going with that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just kind of want to go back in time. We had a lot of discussion 5 years ago, or whenever I think Shirley reviewed it, in terms of the staffing, and there was quite a bit of discussion on what kind of staffing that we were paying for.
Correct, and they have the staffing requirements for the dispatch center. And what we had realized a number of years ago was that the cost of dispatch was never looked at in relationship to the number of calls by CAL FIRE within itself, Calaveras County, Alpine County, and Tuolumne County. So we've asked for a review of that every 5 years, and we have received that, and we're still within the parameters of the percentage of the overall operating cost of the emergency center. We also at that time looked at the possibility of the Sheriff's Department doing dispatch for fire and emergency.
Thank you.
And it was looked at very carefully by then Sheriff Downham. And one of the concerns was it was really cost prohibitive to bring that back into the county for a number of reasons. Personnel, obviously, additional dispatch stations required, but most significantly was the purchasing of the frequencies needed to dispatch fire and emergencies.
Okay.
Yes, Steve.
On that question, and given the need to do long-term planning and the fact that we're building a facility over here, I would believe that maybe there's some cause for us to take a look at this again in the current situation, see what we might do in relation to putting some of that technology in anyway, just because it's smart to update yourself when you build new facilities. But certainly the space, right now we're limited for space. It would cost money to bring in a certain number of dispatchers for that, although the amount of cost by the end of this contract looks like it would pay for almost 5 full-time equivalents, and the question is how many FTEs are needed for this work and whether that meets that aspect. If we're going up at the rate of higher than inflation over a long stretch of time, what's our long-term prospect here, and should we be planning to bring this back in or find a balance in this relationship? If all the calls come into our dispatch and then we're contacting the other dispatch, I'm also not sure that that's the most efficient transaction that we can have, and I know that there have been at least some calls that got a little bollocksed in the transaction. So I just wonder what our current thinking is on this. Should we move forward in this next 3 years, what will we do in the interim to prepare for something that might bring some cost and programmatic efficiencies to this? And that's on all. I'm asking the question to actually all parties on this because I'm sure, because I've heard from CAL FIRE personnel that the current situation sometimes is the transaction is, or maybe it might look like the U.S. Olympic relay team. The time gets dropped on occasion. I think it's by and large we've had very good support and very good people working this, but our system may not facilitate that as to best outcome. So what say the parties on that, and what should we be doing about it as policymakers?
I mean, it's something that certainly can be looked at now that we're looking at a new dispatch center, but under the current system, we really need CAL FIRE to continue with that.
No, I'm not debating that at all. I'm trying to figure out what we can include in our thinking currently to not just make this a reactive piece of it, but that we do something proactive to get to where both parties would like to see the communications.
Steve, I'll at CAL FIRE again. I think you should do that. I think that's a wise move. The 3-year contract there's times of an essence with that one. It takes a long process to get through, and the starting date is July 1st of this year. So, but I think it's wise to look beyond that. I think that's a smart move. CAL FIRE does more than just dispatch, for the county. We do quite a bit. I can let you know some of that, but we do a lot more things that, maybe behind the scenes sort of thing, that you get a little bit more than just somebody calls about a medical and we have somebody come out and monitor that call. We work with the Sheriff's Department quite a bit on search and rescue issues, 4th of July parades, and dispatching issues for those sorts of things. And there's quite a few other things that we do that maybe need to be understood. But certainly, I think the future would be wise to do that. That would be my thinking.
Well, I hope my comments have not been misunderstood to be critical of CAL FIRE. You guys have done tremendous work in my district and certainly continue to work with our agencies. But sometimes I think that we need to joint plan the future together, especially given the new facility and how we integrate things into it.
Right. You would need somebody to be in charge of the calls, and then you could work on support. And we certainly could work with you to set up your own system. We could have folks come by and help you along with that process too over the next 3 years. So we'll gladly do that for you too.
You're most welcome.
Chief, is there any discussion of doing a joint facility again?
I haven't heard that in a while.
Well, that's kind of where I was, why wouldn't we use this moment to merge operations and have one call instead of two? Why we have the technology available, potentially we have the joint capabilities, and it might result in a net savings to both agencies.
Mm-hmm. And there could be a transition period over the next 2 years.
Exactly. This would be our time to do
3 years.
Certainly.
Any other board comments? Do you have any?
Yes, I do. I have a big problem with number one. There's two resolutions for us to vote on here, and I'm making a motion to split those two apart because I have some extreme reservations with the first part. So if we could split those into two different votes, I'd certainly appreciate that, and I make a motion to do so.
Any other board comments at this time? No? If not, I'll open up to public comments.
Savannah Textile Association. We agree with Shirley and also CAL FIRE. This seems to be the best way to do it. We can have wide changes in cost depending on whether we have a customer, a major fire or something like that. The cost could be great, or if we have a year or two where there's hardly any major fire problems, then there'd be quite a bit of savings, because the way this seems to be set up is the cost is not to exceed, which means that we assume they use good management, and the cost could be quite less than the amount figured here. If we, as Maria suggested, if we went to a cost estimate, it's almost like going time and materials with a contractor. You're committed in advance an unknown amount, and a cost estimate would have very little meaning because the county's already committed by contract to it being just an estimate. So I think in practically everything that you do of this nature, you should have cost not to exceed. Thank you.
Any other public comments? If not, I'll bring it back to the board. There's a motion on the floor to separate both resolutions. Do I have a second?
No, I'll second that.
Okay. We will separate. The motion on the floor is to separate. You want to read this through? We will separate the two resolutions. The one approving the attached amendments between the State Department of Forestry and Fire Prevention in Calaveras County, executed on June 9, 2009 for dispatch services for fiscal year 2009-10 in the amount of $206,803, and fiscal year 2010-11 in the amount of $215,548. That would be one that we were going to separate, and then the second one were the current year going into fiscal year 2013-14.
Surely the resolution says 767 on the first one. It should be 608.
On the resolution itself?
I mean, it's just a minor error.
Okay, I can make that correction.
Yeah, just for the original for Gary's signature. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Mr. Spellman, since it was your motion to separate them, you want to talk about resolution number 1?
Yes, sir. I'd like the board, my colleagues here on the board and those in the public audience and the media to recognize we just had a vote in which the Board of Supervisors voted 4-1 to give money back to somebody based on County Council's opinion that it was legally necessary to do so. And that comes out of, when you're addressing legal matters, you look at what you shall and shall not do, supposedly according to contract law. What we have before us today in this first resolution as part of this agenda item is a contractual, actually a dysfunctional contractual issue. The County Board of Supervisors approved for the 2008-2009 fire season an amount of $186,467, of which we paid that. The county also paid in 2009-10 and 10-11. We were contractually obligated to pay the same amount, $186,467. Now, if the cost exceeded that amount that we gave as contractually that we would be obligated to pay, then it was in the event that we went over that, CAL FIRE needed to come to us, give us their revised estimates for services actually rendered. And here in the staff report it says, normally the state's amendments to this agreement for fiscal year 9-10 and fiscal year 10-11 would have been brought to the board during the affected year of service. But CAL FIRE has undergone several changes in the administration of the Tuolumne Calaveras unit, causing a delay in forwarding the amendments to the county. So, since CAL FIRE should have brought these amendments to us 2 years ago, here we are 2 years later, and they're asking us to give them $20,336 for the 09-010 year, and for the 10-11 year, the total actually performed was $215,548 against what we contracted to give them, which was $186,467. And then you have a difference in that year of $29,081. So if you take the 2 years, 09-010 and 10-11, for the money that they should have asked for much long ago, they should have brought that forward to the board. That's a total of $49,417 that CAL FIRE is asking us to retroactively reimburse them for something they should have submitted to us 2 years ago, as far as the first part of that funding goes. So, if logic holds true, if this board and county council said that we have to give $36,000 back to Black Creek LLC because we're contractually obligated, okay, the same holds true for CAL FIRE. CAL FIRE was contractually obligated to give us their amended budget on a certain time, and they haven't. So if they haven't, I'm sorry, it's not a problem. That's $49,000 that we can use in our budget to fund our sheriff's department and other various things that need funding. And you know what? Right now, when we're down to nickels and we're looking at cutting more jobs, this is something I am looking at every single thing that comes before this board. And if there's anything that I can scrape together to save money, to keep people employed, to keep services that are vital to this county, I'm going to do it. And I'm asking that the board deny this back pay because CAL FIRE has not met their contractual obligation. We're meeting our contractual obligation to Black Creek LLC, despite my adverse reactions to that. So I would ask that this board and council also follow the same guidelines they just voted for and deny CAL FIRE due to their contractual obligation that they defaulted on, which was giving us the amended budgets in a prompt time that they should have, but they didn't. And so if we approve giving this money, back pay to CAL FIRE, it's nothing against CAL FIRE. The world operates on contracts. And these people just voted against me, showing that they're in favor of contracts, which is giving back Black Creek LLC their money because we contractually have to. So the same could be said for CAL FIRE. They're contractually obligated, they defaulted on their obligations, and so therefore we are under no obligation to pay them back for those previous 2 years in the amount of $49,417. To me, $49,417 equals somebody on the staff of this county that doesn't have to get laid off. It's nothing against CAL FIRE. I think they do a great job, but we live in an adult world. In an adult world, we have contracts, and I'm willing to debate contracts. But like I said on the previous motion, people voted 4-1 against me in favor of keeping the contract. So if that's their case, they want to keep contracts, show the same integrity, and tell CAL FIRE that they need to keep their contracts, and we'll keep our $49,000, and that'll be a lesson for them moving into the future that they need to get things to us under the obligated contract time frame.
I guess that leads me to a number of questions, but my reading of this at least involves perhaps a different perspective that CAL FIRE might bring, which is that at a point where a contract lapses, it would be possible for a partner, a long-standing partner like Caltrans, to maybe legally withdraw services in that mode under contract law. And I don't know whether that applies to this.
What is Caltrans?
Right here. Excuse me, not Caltrans, CAL FIRE. My apologies. It would apply to them too, I suppose. But what I find important to this deliberation is that CAL FIRE stepped up and continued to provide services despite the fact that the parties had not updated or extended, and that we had some obligation in good faith not to either to refuse the services or to negotiate in good faith to come up with a result the nature of which is before us. And my worry is that if we become strict constructionists on all sides of all relationships, that we wind up putting a great number of people at risk. CAL FIRE stopped some potentially catastrophic fires last 2 years in my district, for instance. If they had been real strict about whether we have these agreements in place or not, they could have said, oh, well, let's stay in the station. I don't want that kind of relationship developed with such critical partners. And my question to you is, were these services provided despite the fact that the T's weren't crossed and I's dotted? And is this an accurate reflection of the actual cost of those services or not?
Yes, the services have been continued to be provided by CAL FIRE. Under the original agreement, it stated that they could continue for a year. They have obviously continued past that and continued providing our services.
Were they obligated under agreements with our county that were updated? They were not for the second year, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So why did they not? If they didn't have a contract, I would ask this to Steve. If you didn't have a contract obligating you, why did you provide the services anyway? This is somewhat abstract, but probably worth bringing up given the conversation at hand.
I guess I'd say it was the right thing to do. We had folks at risk, and we knew that was our obligation to take care of those folks to make sure they got proper dispatch to their emergencies and their medical situation. So we knew that was the right thing to do, and the right thing for the citizens to do, so we continue to do that.
You do fire and medical emergencies, correct?
And handle dispatchers.
And the one thing I did want to mention is that for Amendment 2, we are in the current effective year. So by approving the contract, we are in the current affected year for Amendment 2. In Amendment 1, as I mentioned, even though the total amount of the contract is $28,000 more than the prior year, the final bill I have from CAL FIRE for the last quarter, actual cost that has not been paid, is actually $5,694.16.
In other words, we haven't really separated the retro from the future because one falls twixt the twain, and the second piece of this fiscal year is covered under Measure 2 here.
I guess I have a couple questions, Shirley, concerning the amendments here. When CAL FIRE approaches you with the amendments for the additional costs, how are they handled? I mean, are they spelled out? Do they give you all documentation other than what was provided here, where it showed the number of calls? I mean, does it show work? Does it show pay increases, whether they're COLAs or whether they are longevity increases, or how do we determine? Because some of this is based on some formula that was given for additional costs, and I'm just interested in how that's given to us.
They provide an Exhibit D, Schedule A breakdown of the costs, what the personnel costs are, what the operating costs are, and what the benefits are. And you can compare from year to year what those mean. They also provided us, after the board packet was together, a schedule cost analysis of the dispatch center, what the percentage of, the number of calls by county, and what the costs are, and it's a breakdown to ensure that the percentage ratio for each county is related to the calls.
So are we paying, I guess this question would be for Steve, when you give us these estimates that you have, and this probably pertains more to item number 2 here, the second resolution, are we paying for FTEs? In other words, are we paying for one full-time employee around the clock, 24/7? And so you're basing your estimates on those costs?
We're paying for, Steve Hall and CAL FIRE, we're paying for a comm operator, 2.4 comm operators for the year, and that gives us 12 hours a day and some overlap days. So additional hours through the week, but essentially it's 12 hours a day. A little bit about the cost increase recently. I think it was 05, 06. I think we recently moved our dispatcher clerks up to the level of a CHP dispatch position, which is called comm operator. That was an increase of pay, and what you've seen, a lot of those increases have been step increases over the last 5 years, which end July 1st, 2011. So some of those increases have been bringing our comm operators, which were dispatch operators, up to a higher level of pay, more reflective of what they do. They're all risk dispatchers. They do a lot of complicated work that would be more equal to what a CHP dispatch would get. So you're seeing some of those costs that have been step increases, and those step increases, all our folks will be top step by the end of this fiscal year. Some of the other increases have been retirement benefits and those sorts of things, but the reason you've seen those increases from 08 to 9 to 10 to now 11 is that the change in their classification.
I have one other question while you're up there. Given the fact of what transpired, if at the beginning of the fiscal year last year, previous year, when the contract had ended, could you, by law or by right, if you wanted to, just say we're done and walk away from it, and then the county would have the problem? I mean, is there anything obligating you to continue the service by law or anything else?
No, I don't believe there would be.
The contract ended, we're done until we get a new contract, but you decided to continue with providing the service because of the vitality needed by the county for those services.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Walk away.
Any other board comments or questions?
I have a question for County Council. It's my understanding that CAL FIRE is in a position, and they've taken a sworn oath to protect the community and the citizens of this state, being that it's a state organization. I don't believe that they have the legal right to walk away regardless of whether or not they're being remunerated or not. That's question number one. Question number two, do we have a legal obligation contractually to back pay when these people have not fulfilled their requirement?
I don't know how to answer the first question. I think I can't answer the first question. I don't think it's a legally enforceable obligation to say that the duty to protect the public is all-encompassing. So I can't answer that.
Could you, if I might, I'd like to put a little detail on the question. There's something before us that deals with dispatch and other particular services that's part of this agreement. And it is those specific things, I think, that the question refers to. They have an overall California obligation in terms of public safety. Do they have an obligation to continue to serve the county in the dispatch function and other things outlined in this agreement?
The function actually that I was referring to is if there was a skirmish in Clements or Lockford per se, then they called on Calaveras County to add force to that for our sheriffs to go and help out in Lockford. It's just past Wallace, outside our borders. But we do have an obligation. Our peace officers have an obligation to respond to that, regardless of whether or not they believe that they're going to be paid by San Joaquin County. They have an obligation to respond. The same way that CAL FIRE has an obligation to respond if there is an event where lives are at risk. Regardless of whether or not they know they're going to get paid, they have an obligation to respond.
I think you're talking about different moral obligations.
Public safety.
I deal in legally enforceable obligations, and I guess the answer to your question is that the general duty to protect the public does not form the basis for a legally enforceable obligation. You couldn't go into court and allege a breach of that duty because of the failure to provide a dispatch service. So.
Also, I want to clarify, they're not just dispatching CAL FIRE, they are dispatching all our fire districts.
Steve brought up the dispatch. That wasn't part of my question.
Okay, I was trying to bore down into what was before us here.
I was talking about responding. I would argue that if there was a fire and CAL FIRE was available and they chose not to respond, they would have liability.
But this isn't about fire, this is just dispatch.
This is dispatch services.
Dispatch services.
Yes. Okay. I think that's correct. The second question, refresh me on the second question.
Do we have a contractual obligation, or because of the contract that we have with CAL FIRE, are we legally required to back pay them for what appears to be a breach in contract where they should have given us amended fiscal updates, but they did not? So does that, because they formed a breach in that contract by not fulfilling their end of it, does that require us to pay them back, or can we choose to not pay accordingly because of the breach?
Okay, I wouldn't use that term. The fact that they continue to provide the service doesn't amount to a breach of a contract. The board memo doesn't use the term, but what the board is being asked to do here is to ratify what's happened in the past, to actually approve retroactively what's going on because of the fact that the service was provided. The board has that authority. You have the authority to ratify this agreement, and that's essentially what you're being asked to do. You have that authority. It's up to the board.
So we also have the authority to not ratify it based on the fact that they did not fulfill their agreement, which was that they would give us an amended fiscal report.
You have that authority to not ratify it. I don't know what effect that would have to do with the overall negotiation going forward, but you have the authority to ratify it or not, to approve it or not approve it.
Okay, that ends the conversation we've had. Do I hear a motion?
I Al had something, public comment?
Well, I thought we opened it.
I got my answer to my question from the CAL FIRE. Apparently, those previous agreements did have a not to exceed figure, and they exceeded the figure. So Supervisor Spellman's probably correct in that those are two modifications that should have been done at that time, but by apparent mistake was overlooked, and so they're asking to correct the mistake. So I think the taxpayers would think that it's probably proper to go ahead and correct the error.
Marty Crane.
Marty Crane, Valley Springs Rancho. I just find it interesting that, well, first of all, my home was a bullseye in the middle of the 2006 Pattison fire, and I am here today in great part because of CAL FIRE. I applaud you. Thank you. I would hate to think that because of administrative changes and a ball got dropped or a paper didn't get filed or an amendment wasn't brought forward in a timely fashion, that they would have said, forget it, just let it burn. I also find it interesting that Supervisor Spellman, you're talking about adamantly scraping together every penny to save us from ruin, financial ruin here in Calaveras County, which is something we are all looking at. When last week we saw fit to throw away $70,000 that would have had major impact just so that we could maybe take a poke at Delta College, which we could have dealt with in another arena, but we threw a lot of people under the bus without watching who they were and what they were about to benefit from. And so I just find, and also the funds that we would have spent, we are now probably going to have to spend from the general fund for the survey that Habitat for Humanity might have been able to help us with. So those funds are not recoverable. So once again, we waste $1 to save a dime. And in this case, who are we? As people, as citizens, what kind of character do we have? If they provided the service and it was service that we absolutely needed and it saved lives, then why aren't we going to address that? So, thank you.
Any other public comments? Okay, bring it back to the board.
If it's, the money, addressing Ms. Crane's comments, the money from last week with the Delta College deal and other things, that didn't affect anybody that's employed in this county. That money did not affect anybody in the county government's employment. No, it did not. It did not.
Okay.
Okay. That was something else. Okay. The other thing, you people have a real gall to try to twist these things. I'm trying to keep jobs in this county. I'm trying to support our county. And at the drop of a hat, everybody here is willing to throw money down the drain. We're willing to give money to somebody who owes us $147,000 in bankruptcy. We're willing to give them $36,000 out of our budget. Okay? But when we have at the same hand, when somebody's broken their contractual obligation to us, we see no problem with giving them the money. And if you think that this organization, I don't have anything against CAL FIRE. I'm fully in support of fire, police, other efforts for community safety. But a contract is a contract. And if you're saying that we should pay them this money in retrospect when they've broken their contract with us because they provided a service, then the first person I'm going to talk to when I leave this room today is Sheriff Kuntz. And I'm going to tell him to provide the service that's necessary to keep this county safe. And if he racks up bills because there's extra hires that need to be hired in the Sheriff's Department to keep our county safe, we'll use that same logic. And if we have to cut any number of things to pay for it, then so be it. If that's the way that this board works, and the way that these people in this audience want to proceed, then I'll let Sheriff Kuntz know, if he's not already aware after I leave this meeting, that he can do whatever he needs to do to make sure that our county is safe. Because that's what I'm hearing. These people have provided safety for our county through CAL FIRE services, even though it was a breach of contract because they spent in excess of what we said they could spend. and they're asking for retroactive payment. So, if that holds true for CAL FIRE, it should also hold true for the Calaveras County Sheriff's Department. Because I believe that the Sheriff's Department and the service and protection they provide is equal, if not greater, than the services and protection provided by CAL FIRE.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I motion to deny resolution number 1, unless there's anybody that has anything they'd like to add to it to try to justify why we would give them that money back when we don't have to contractually. County Council is giving an opinion that we do not have to do that. We have the authority to not give that money back.
Do I have a second? Motion has died for lack of a second. Do I hear another motion?
Yes, I make the motion to approve the first portion of this resolution and meet our obligations to an organization that has been a good partner, has fulfilled duties beyond their contractual obligations in this interim period of difficulty on both sides, by the way, I might add. And I'm pleased that we can at least have the opportunity today to meet those obligations and move forward.
I have a second.
Yeah, second. And surely you'll just make that one typo change. Thank you.
So motion.
Second.
Motion still stand with that change?
It does.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
The motion passes 3-1. Supervisor Spellman in the negative. We go on to item number 2. Have any board comments?
Okay, now I move this item on the amount not to exceed for the chief.
Do I hear a second?
I will second this with an understanding, or I should say with a hope, that administration and CAL FIRE can develop over the next couple of years a long-range plan that can create interagency efficiencies and utilize the opportunities presented by our new facility.
So you want the amendment changed?
I'm not asking
the resolution changed?
I'm not asking that the resolution be changed. I'm asking that the parties be advised of the conversations that we've had here today and act accordingly in follow-up, especially with CAL FIRE's generous offer to work with us on that.
Wait a minute, Steve, do you want to leave
My motion is to leave the resolution as is, but I want to be clear about my feelings about what needs to happen next.
Okay. I support the resolution as presented.
Is there any, so that's a second. We have a motion by Supervisor Walensky, a second by Supervisor Callaway. Is there any further board discussion?
I'll say that I'll vote in the affirmative to approve this measure, and I second what Supervisor Walensky said, that it would be my hope that there would be work in collaboration with the Sheriff's Department in terms of dispatch possibilities in the near future.
And since I opened it up for public comment on the previous one, is there any public comments?
I'm old and I can't remember things so well. Is the motion...
Your name is Al.
My name is Al Sagal, Calaveras County Taxpayer Association. And the question I have, are we changing the wording in an amount not to exceed to something more vague?
No.
No, okay. That remains the same.
Thank you.
Any other further public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Before I call for the vote, I have one question of Jeannie Boyce. Jeannie, under the current proposal for the governor's budget, is there a measure in there to freeze salaries at the current rate for the next fiscal year?
For all state employees?
Yeah.
I do not know the answer to that. I'll have to look at that.
I think so, actually.
I know they haven't had any type
know whether it's been passed or not.
Right, and each bargaining unit has different agreements, and so depending on...
I think it's been indicated as an intention, but it is subject to the collective bargaining process,
Right.
and that's why it's not yet.
To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any state employees getting raises. I'm sure maybe Steve could tell us, but...
How about longevity increases?
Oh, that's
all negotiated.
It's all negotiated as part of the bargaining process,
but I think it's part of the proposal to go forward in negotiations with those. So with that understanding that that occurs, and there are some give-backs by state employees groups, and if the Cal Fire is one of those, that this contract would reflect that we would not see the increases of 10% that we're showing here as increases.
Right, because we only pay the actual cost, so if their costs are reduced, our costs would be reduced.
I suppose to make that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Seeing none?
What, Gary, I have a question outside of this for the...
Sure.
Steve. I have a question, Chief, on, it's not this, what's occurring on the SRA areas? Do you anticipate a change in the state responsibility areas?
That the governor had mentioned before.
No, okay, that's fine.
Hard for me to comment on that. I know it's a high priority. It's a priority, but I understand it wasn't pushed forth like the other ones were. But I still think it's a priority. It's there, but I don't think it has the same force that it did a little bit ago.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 14. This is a minute order approving a change order to ACOM in the amount of $25,561 for assessment of an expanded area of potential impact required by U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And this is brought to us by Mr. Doug Evans.
Thank you. Doug Evans with Kitchell. As part of the environmental approval process, the Corps of Engineers is requiring the county and our consultants to expand the study area. The initial, what they call the area of potential impact, was the jail site and the property immediately adjacent to the jail site. But by adding the roadway and the improvements that we're going to make to Mountain Ranch Road to connect the new roadway into Mountain Ranch Road, the Corps is requiring an expanded study area. And the purpose of this amendment is for AECOM to conduct that the study of that expanded area. There's 4 or 5 parts to this. The first is to conduct a jurisdictional wetland study of that area and interact with the Corps of Engineers with relationship to that wetland study. To amend the Section 404 nationwide 39 permit application, and again to interact with the Corps. To amend the 401 regional water quality certification application and to coordinate with regional water quality. To amend the Department of Fish and Game 1602 streambed alteration agreement and coordinate with the Department of Fish and Game as necessary. And to revise the biological assessment and to deal with the Corps and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in relationship to the biological assessment. The reason we're going to AECOM and not trying to go outside to some other agency to do this is that the Corps is requiring the initial study be expanded, and there's really no viable other way to approach this. This is a requirement that the Corps is putting on the project that we have to do in order to get their approval and get these various permits that I just mentioned.
Okay, any board questions on this item? Yes, Supervisor Spellman.
I would like to know, since AECOM, in their professional responsibility, cost the county $17,000 for the elderberry bush issue, which we negotiated down to $12,500, I believe, was the final number. If it is that AECOM is going to conduct this work and they're asking for $25,000 to do so, I would like to know if it would be the will of the board to approach them to help offset some of the costs that we ate in that $12,500 the last time that we used their services. They're asking us again for $25,000. The county had to shell out $12,500 in regards to the elderberry bush issue the last time they did work for us on this project. I'd like to see them put forth a fig leaf, if you would, as a show of good effort to, if they're going to continue to do business with us, that they would once again recognize the default the last time that they were in our employ and give us a discounted price on this particular project.
Yes, Steve.
I would try to ask this question before moving into that realm. Didn't we make them eat a good portion of their expenses on the elderberry thing by negotiating it from 20-some thousand down to 12? I worry we're asking them to double eat. What's your comment?
We did do that with PSA Dewberry, yes.
Right.
PSA Dewberry.
Right, okay, but they were contracted by this group.
Yes.
Dewberry took the responsibility. AECOM's the one that was responsible. Dewberry was responsible financially, but maybe AECOM could show some goodwill by reducing the cost in this particular one, because it wasn't them that took the hit. It was Dewberry actually.
I'd like to respond. There's two components there. First of all, we need to go back to what originally happened. Because AECOM didn't want that the Corps of Engineers would make a decision one way or the other. They gave us an opinion based upon historical information, and they're a professional in this field, but they can't want what the Corps of Engineers is going to do. And we understood their advice, we took their advice, we moved in that direction, and the Corps of Engineers chose to look at it a different way. I don't think you can blame a consultant for giving you that opinion, which is a valid opinion, and the Corps of Engineers choosing to go in a different direction. The other concern I have is any delay to this item, because we've got to get these permits in place in order to begin construction. And I'm concerned that if we have to go back and spend weeks renegotiating this and bringing it back to the board, it's going to jeopardize the bids that we have in place. It's going to jeopardize our ability to start construction before the winter months come in. So I'm very concerned about any delay to this. I'm sorry to interrupt, I wouldn't have any problem going back and perhaps having some kind of a discussion with AECOM. I don't know exactly what it would be. I'd have to look through their proposal a little bit and see if there's some opportunity to tighten it up in some manner, but my concern isn't delaying this at all. It's huge.
Well, let me put it in perspective for those who don't usually listen to these type of hearings. There's people that may be here for the first time today, or maybe watching at home these proceedings, and to them, they're not privy to all the knowledge that you and I and the rest of this board are. To them, let me give an analogy. You're saying that we're hiring them. We hired them originally because they are a consultant, and we hired them for their professional opinion. That's no guarantee that it would be accepted by the Army Corps, which it was not. We had to make a revision. Now, in layman's terms, for someone that may not be familiar with these proceedings, to put it in their realm, if they hired someone to do their taxes as a professional tax consultant, they chose to use that professional tax consultant's advice, and they ended up getting audited and had to pay thousands of dollars because that advice was not, although it couldn't be guaranteed and wasn't guaranteed, caused them, the net effect for that person was the advice they took from their tax consultant cost them thousands of dollars personally. So if it were that they even gave that tax consultant a second chance to be able to work for them, I would assume that that tax consultant would be glad to have the opportunity to try to make up for what turned out to be a faulty decision based on their opinion. And so I think that most people could understand that, having paid taxes and knowing that some of them do have tax preparers, and tax preparers can make mistakes. It's a fact of life, and it's a risk, just like these people have taken a risk. They're giving a professional opinion. But in moving forward, just as the personal taxpayer, if they even return to that tax advisor, would assume that that person would give them some kind of a discount and just kind of a good faith opportunity to win back their business based on the unpredictable outcome of their opinion. And so I think that AECOM, as being contracted by this county, they make no reservations about their opinion, whether or not it'll be accepted, and that's perfectly fine. It's within the professional realm. However, I think that it might be a sign of goodwill to the people of this county who pay the taxes, who pay that bond for this jail to be built, that these people would show good faith, and that while their decision last time in their professional opinion is not guaranteed, that because they cost the county $12,500, no matter what the original bill was, it ultimately cost $12,500 more for their opinion. And so I would hope that they would make some concession in showing good faith that they are willing to reduce the amount that they're asking this time to try to make amends.
I've got a couple of comments. I think it's not a bad analogy, actually, using the taxpayer analogy, but I think it's more like the tax consulting firm says, you can take this deduction or not. If you take this deduction, it's going to save you a certain amount of money. And we wanted to take that deduction because it made our project a little better with regard to designing in relationship to the elm tree. But it was our decision to take that deduction not with a guarantee from our tax preparer, to use your analogy, that it's going to get through the IRS, with an opinion that it probably would. And when it didn't, we made that decision, or the county made that decision as the owner of the project, but was fully advised in making that decision. Also, AECOM has provided some additional services for the county with, this will be the third time the wetland delineation map is being revised. The second revision they didn't charge us for. They didn't put that on the bill. So they have actually done some good faith effort, and our displeasure from the prior interactions with AECOM was conveyed, the board's displeasure was conveyed back to AECOM. So,
any other board comments? If not, I'll open it up to the public. Any public comment?
Little Ray Strange, Calaveras. I don't know if you folks are aware of it, but just from being a dumb person in the audience, don't you guys get tired of this last-minute emergency stuff coming to you and all that? You have to do it and so on. You guys pay some pretty good money for these folks, and I'm sure they well deserve it. But if they were aware of it, did they notify you guys that you might have to do it? I mean, they're the professionals, and the last-minute issues coming up, I know it's just privilege stuff, $24,000, $50,000, $100,000 is not a big deal for you, but you pay good money to be kept up to date. But these constantly, certain issues, you don't do it by such tomorrow or next day, you're going to lose the grant, or you're going to lose money, forget it, pass it, and you read about it later. This is not out there, folks. You got professionals to get you guys up to date. If you don't demand that, the taxpayer should demand it. Let them get on the ball and get things up to date, on time, so you have sufficient time to consider these issues. It's all these constant add-ons. Don't you folks get tired of it? As a taxpayer, I do. Maybe some other people get. Either you guys know what you're doing, or get somebody, hire somebody who will tell you what to do. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Al Segal, Calaveras County Taxpayer Association. When the county contracts with people, the people that bid on those contracts have to have assurance that the county's going to honor its agreement. Okay? If the agreement provides some special warranty or guarantee of results, well, that's one thing. Then there can't be any overages. The contractor or the person that's doing the work has to take a loss, perhaps. But when the contracts do not have that sort of provision, the assumption is when you hire a professional, you're assuming that the professional is not perfect, that they sometimes make mistakes, and that the consequences of the mistakes, unless the consequences were in design or something like that, are borne by the owner. An architect makes a mistake, he advises his client to grow ivy. So this came before the board before, and it's a good point. But under all this is the question of overregulation. Think about it. Look at the list of things that have to be approved by these government departments. And if we ask each one, is that really needed? Well, the answer usually would be no. But it's written, and we do it. How much of expense is chewed up by unnecessary regulation? A lot of it's coming from the federal government, some from the state. And it'd be nice to be able to quantify that and then approach our representatives, which is the proper way to do it, I think, and ask for relief. In the case of the federal government, we could ask them to simply follow the Constitution. And 90% of our problems with the federal government in our county will be solved. Thank you for the comments.
Thank you, Al. Any other public comments? Mr. Evans, would you like to answer those questions that were raised by the public?
Sure. The first with regard to changes in the project. This is a complex, and actually I can combine the two. This is a complex process. There's a lot of environmental laws. I read off the different permits and the different regulations that we have to comply with. When we put together a budget for a project, and you'll see each time we come forward, we say that this project is covered within the current budget of the project. We put together contingencies for this specific purpose. And while we were talking, I looked at the contingency. I don't have it right here, but anyway, I looked at the contingency just to verify what's left, and there's a significant portion of that contingency left that we haven't used. Now, that's not saying we want to use that, but I think overall this project has gone very well. It's a complex process, and it's something that you're not going to go linearly from A to Z. There's going to be lots of diversions to get a project through, and we set up the budgets, we plan for that. We haven't used even half of that contingency money that's set aside for these consultants. So I think in the bigger picture of things, this project is going quite well. And if I might point out, the majority of the things that we've come back to the board on are related to the environment and the Corps of Engineers and the wetlands. It's not a broad perspective over the entire project. The rest of the project, I believe, has gone very well.
Okay.
And I would agree with Al's comments. Unfortunately, I can't take on the Corps of Engineers. So.
Steve. Somebody suggested that we get someone who knows what they're doing. You see him before you. He's at the podium. We've got him, and I'm glad we do. And I would also want to echo if you take a look at what was happening before your arrival and the amount of overruns, exceptions, last-minute craziness, not just in a narrow area that is beyond our control, but within the things that were our control in the process, and the difference between that iteration and that which evolved from your arrival onward, I would have to say that this project is in very good hands with somebody who definitely knows what they're doing, and I just hope you don't get discouraged by suggestions that maybe we don't have that in the house.
Thank you.
I would have to echo that myself, Doug. Dealing with your predecessor and dealing with you is it's like night and day. You understand the process, in my opinion, very well. Very well. Thank you. Any other comments?
Just when Mr. Spellman talked about a sign of goodwill, ACOM should do, some gimmies. Mr. Evans said they did on the second filing. I thought I heard him say it's similar to what we just passed with CAL FIRE. It's a sign of goodwill of work that was performed. And understanding the time frame and the necessity, I will move this item.
I will second the item.
We have a second. Any other board comments before? Yes, Supervisor Spellman.
I'd like to echo Steve and Gary's comments about Mr. Evans. I've found him to be very professional, and I'm glad that we have him to be part of this process.
Thank you.
And I just, my bottom line is that I've been given the responsibility to look after the taxpayers' dollars, and so sometimes there may be uncomfortable subjects that need to be approached, and I can't shun those because it's my responsibility. I have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers, and that's no reflection on my opinion of your professionalism or how the process is proceeding. I think I've mentioned that to you before. So I just again want to clarify my opinion on that. As far as this motion, I will be abstaining from it. I don't doubt that what Mr. Evans says is true, that they've done some goodwill in terms of stuff that needed to be done that wasn't paid for. But without documentation of that, I can't very well give it my yes vote, although I won't vote no against it because I'm not sure that they haven't given some goodwill. So I will abstain from this measure. I'm sure it'll pass.
What kind of documentation were you looking for?
Well, Mr. Evans mentioned that there was some wetland mitigation or some things that were done. This is the third time we revisited it. And I believe he said after the original discussion that the AECOM got the memo, and there was some work that needed to be done between the first time and this being the third time. There was a second period there where there was some stuff that needed to be done and revised. And Mr. Evans said that they did that pro bono or at a discount or something like that as a goodwill effort. And I don't doubt that they have that. I don't have documentation of that, so I'm just going to abstain. Rather than say no, but I don't feel I can responsibly say yes, thinking that, there isn't something more that they could do. So I'm just going to, on this one, I'm just going to refrain and abstain.
Okay, I have a motion by Supervisor Callaway and a second by Supervisor Walensky. All in favor, say aye. And anybody voting no? Seeing no, it's abstain. One abstention.
And one absent.
And one absence. Mr. Tryon is not here. Thank you, Doug. Thank you. I want to remind the board that we will be leaving here at about 11:45 to go over to the Senior Citizen of the Year's luncheon. So we have one other item here, two items actually before noon recess, and that would be item 15, an informational briefing. A Calaveras County 2011 point-in-time homeless survey, Calaveras Works and Human Services Agency.
Good morning, I'm Kathy Hull. I'm representing Calaveras Works and Human Services Agency. And just to present the homeless survey that we did in January. I believe you all have a copy.
Yes.
And basically what it shows is we have a total of 185 homeless in our communities, 135 adults with 50 dependent children. I find it interesting, too, that we have 9...
Could you speak into the mic? Thank you.
We have 9 unaccompanied 18 years and younger that are homeless. Our homeless population is a population that you don't see, but they're out there. And, of course, at Calaveras Works, we see them a lot at our door. And I'd like to introduce Dina Barber. She is from ACCA and part of the continuum of care for Calaveras, Amador, and Tuolumne County.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board and county staff.
Good morning.
I am Beetle Barber. I'm here today as co-leader of the Central Sierra Continuum of Care. We're a planning group for homeless housing and services in Amador, Calaveras, and Tuolumne counties. We're taking a regional approach to that. As Kathy was saying, in January of each year, we do a survey of homeless persons, and I'm going to give you a few of the results from those surveys. We did this as a region, so we do have regional totals as well. 498 adults who are homeless in Amador, Calaveras, and Tuolumne, and 282 children. As Kathy mentioned, the totals in Calaveras County, 135 adults and 50 children. Another point in that, a detail, is that of those 50 children, 23 of them were ages 5 and under, and we did have one pregnant mom to be out there.
Did you count her as two?
Sorry?
Did you count her as two?
No. Okay, in 2009, we did another street survey in Calaveras, and the totals were much smaller then. And so we're kind of looking at reasons why we almost doubled the count this year. One is definitely due to the economy in general. Certainly the increase in homeless among single males. We had 50 single males who were homeless this year in 2011. So the worsening economy has had definitely an effect. And also we made a decision to include couch surfers this year. We did not do that in 2009, and we decided to do it this year because our work with your social services and nonprofits in Calaveras County convinces us that they really know who is homeless out there. They deal with them, as Kathy said, they're at the door. And so it made sense to do that. To be specific, we counted only those couch surfers who said they would not be able to stay there. That was temporary dwelling, and they had to leave within 48 hours. A couch surfer is someone who is obviously staying on a couch or in an empty room or in the basement, that kind of thing. So other highlights from the survey, and I'm just going to be giving you dry statistics. There are other people here today who'd like to talk about personal encounters they had with homelessness. The largest age group was adults from 19 to 59 years. A total of 52 were in the age group of 19 to 30, and then higher than that, 68 were 31 to 59. So they're slightly more in the older category. As Kathy mentioned, there are 9 unaccompanied youth, and as a side note, on a regional note, we counted 50 unaccompanied youth this year. We've never had anything like that count, and we really don't know why they were willing to engage with us and let us count them this year. Unaccompanied youth are younger than 18, and they're already at odds with the law by being out there alone. But as you know, they are out there alone.
Was there any indication as to common age? Was it like 15 to 17?
Ran the gamut. We interviewed a young woman in Tuolumne County who was 13.
Wow.
Gender breakdown, 83 were male, which is about 63 of the total of adults, and 50 were female, 37. And the only thing that's unusual about that is in 2009 it was almost 50-50 in Calaveras. In fact, it was 51% female and 49% male. So there's been a change, and again, we would attribute that, I think, to the worsening economy and so many single males who are homeless because they're unemployed. A lot of people ask, where did the homeless come from? Approximately 77% of the adults we surveyed said they were already living in Calaveras County when they became homeless. And 88% of them said they consider Calaveras County to be their home. And that's a trend we've observed since we started doing surveys back in 2004. Majority of individuals surveyed in Calaveras County are actual residents who have a strong connection to the community. They're not transients. Where are they sleeping? 11 of the adults surveyed were staying in an emergency homeless shelter, and that is undoubtedly the Resource Connections shelter for women and their children fleeing domestic violence. 65 people said they were sleeping on a friend's couch, but knew that they couldn't stay there. 24 said they were sleeping in their vehicles. In January of 2011, I don't know if you remember, but it would have been a very bad time to be sleeping in your car. 28 were sleeping outdoors. They were either in campgrounds or other locations. 3 of them had paid for a night in a motel. 2 were currently being evicted. They were in a rental, but they were losing it. 1 was sleeping on a church pew, and another one was sleeping in an unlocked office building, which he declined to identify. Reasons that they became homeless, again this year as in 2009, overwhelmingly that there's just no work. There's no type of employment at all. And income-wise, that was true as well. Only 36 of the adults surveyed had a job. All the rest of them were unemployed and hardly able to pull together the odd jobs that they'd been doing before. Disabling conditions, fewer persons this year reported having a physical or medical disability, but greater numbers reported living with a diagnosed mental illness or substance abuse. And yes, homeless people who are responsible for their own homelessness by abusing substances admit that during the survey. In 2009, only 15% of the adults surveyed reported a diagnosis of mental illness. In 2011, 24% of them reported that they had that diagnosis. That's about 32 adults. Because we're also working with Calaveras County Behavioral Health on housing for this population, it's important to note that increase. Individuals with circumstances such as those require more detailed case management and assistance. Again, as I said, income, very little income among the homeless. 8 of those surveyed were veterans. 3 of them had been in active duty. And that's my report. If you have time, we would like to bring a few people up to report on individual encounters. Do you have questions for me?
Any questions on the board?
When you said most of them were considered themselves Calaveras residents, I guess I couldn't find that just something that you knew. What does most mean?
88%.
It's at the bottom down here.
Was it? Did I miss that?
77.8% said they were living in Calaveras County when they became homeless, and 88.1% said they considered Calaveras County home.
That it was home sweet home.
Thank you. The only other question I had is that when I was talking to some of the people involved with doing the surveys, that they said they ran into people who didn't want to answer, so they were not counted. So where are we on that? Because, I mean, I know whenever it's passed, we have our CalWorks staff is busier than I wish they were, as I'm sure that's true in other parts of the county. So out of the 185, what is that in relation to the educated opinion of people who wouldn't respond?
I'm starting to feel confident in our numbers. We've been doing this for a couple of years now. You're right, every year there are people who absolutely refuse. They will, if you're out on the street trying to survey them, they'll yell at you and throw things at you because they don't want to be counted. And I think that they certainly have a right to their privacy and their dignity. I'm starting to feel like our numbers are correct in terms of how we should deploy our resources, if you will. I mean, these people are willing to come forward and to be counted. The guidance that we receive from this, from the federal government, is that no matter how good you are at counting, you'll only get 10%. So if we conclude there might be 1,800 people who are homeless in Calaveras County, we can only deal with the 185 who are willing to deal with us.
And we don't work through the schools?
We do, yes. The county school...
Okay,
the county school liaison.
I hear teachers tell me about kids they know sleeping in cars.
Right, and the county schools office has a homeless liaison who attends our meeting and is part of our planning process.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Al, before we open it up to the public, she wanted to bring some members that were out there forward.
Hi, I'm Sammy Rhodes.
Speak, and then we'll open it up to the public.
I'm Sammy Rhodes from Sierra Hope, and our surveys were basically in Angels Camp. I wanted to just talk about a couple of them. Amazingly, when you talk to these people, sometimes, occasionally, you get that roller coaster when they're talking, because it could indeed be us. One gentleman, 48-year-old male, who, in response to where he was living when he became homeless, was Romania. He's from here. Met a woman, moved to Romania. Then he went to Alaska, was several years there, was on the city council, had a small business. Business went bad. Redistricting type stuff, he lost the city council position. Wife went back to Romania, he followed her. Lost the house. She wouldn't go back to him. He came back to Calaveras County because he had some distant relatives here. So I'm asking him about his education, and he was pretty intelligent, you could tell when we were talking. And he has a master's degree. And he had just got done applying at the Burger King and could hardly wait for the McDonald's to open so that he could start applying there. And last month, he came in and talked to me, and he had been sleeping on some private property fenced in with a piece of tin over it. And he was making his coffee, and he always had his jug of water to put his little fire out. But his sheriff drove by, and he was evicted from there. So he is now in a homeless shelter for 30 days, but he's still in the same situation, only now he's warm. My second one, well known around Angels Camp just because he was always a local handyman, 53 years old, and with the economy, didn't get as many jobs to do as handyman and landscaping stuff. And so he had also volunteered a lot at food pantries, churches. And so he's the one who's been sleeping on the church pew, going in at night, sleeping on the church pew. And he came in, he wouldn't tell me where he was staying. The way I know is he came in and asked me to close my door. And he said, if you don't see me for a couple weeks, would you come and look for me, because I don't want them to find me there when they come in for church. That one got to me. We haven't seen him for a couple weeks, but I can't find him at the church. So I don't know where he is, but he's out there somewhere. This is us. My hours got cut. This is us. You. Thank you.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Denise Cloward, and I am the shelter coordinator for the ATCA Emergency Shelter in Jackson. Ironically enough, the very wonderful ending to that particular story is, Sammy and I haven't spoke, that gentleman from Romania is now my caretaker in the Amador shelter, and he is an excellent caretaker. His resume precedes what she was speaking of. He's been a police officer, he's been in the Peace Corps, and he has excellent communication skills with the residents, so that was a good ending. I was responsible for the point-in-time survey in Amador County, but I had the pleasure of interviewing some Calaveras citizens as well, and I'm also from Calaveras County. I chose this particular story because I didn't actually realize that I was in the middle of a survey until I was halfway through it. I was in the post office, digging through my mail in Mokill, complaining about my bills and how they stuffed too much stuff in my box. And the lady next to me started to tell me her story about coming up from Fresno to take care of her sick father. And she has a 10-year-old son. She chose to homeschool him so that he could have the rest of the 5 months with his grandfather, and unfortunately his grandfather had just recently passed away and lost his battle with cancer. She was staying at the Mokill Ledger, and she had 3 days left to stay in that particular hotel. She had sold all of the rest of her father's belongings to get to this point, and obviously he wasn't well off, so there was just enough money to bury him and take care of his, personal things. So this woman was working part-time in a local restaurant, looking for a second job. She told me that she was too proud to sign up for food stamps. She said she liked to go to the churches because they don't judge her as well as she thought the county might judge her. Those were her words. So I told her about our safety net services, and the good ending to this story is, I know we're almost out of time, but she called me about a month later and stated that she went ahead and followed through with contacting 2 of the churches that I had told her about in Amador County, and they were able to fund her with 2 bus passes to get her and her son back to Fresno to kind of start over and live with cousins at that point. What I learn every day in my job in the trenches of homelessness is that it can happen to any of us at any given moment, and that homeless people are just the same as we are. And so working with the homeless can be fascinating once we get past our own preconceptions. Some homeless have graduate degrees, others served with honor in the military, and still others once held high-paying jobs. Until a catastrophic illness exceeded all insurance claims, until an ugly divorce stripped them of their families and their money, until they entered a spiral of drug addiction and alcoholism, until mental illness consumed their ability to function in society. I think we need to continue the work that we do. I'm very proud to work in the organization that I work for. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be brief. Krista Thompson,
Behavioral Health Services. While I didn't have the privilege to participate in the count this year, I have been working pretty closely with two populations that we serve, one of which is our mental health consumers as part of our kind of consumer leadership team. And I asked them very recently, our team has now grown to about 17, and I asked them recently how many of them had ever been homeless, and all but, I believe, 2 raised their hand. So that was pretty alarming for me. They are, as a group, very passionate about the housing that we are developing, and I want to thank the board for your support in that regard. I've also had the privilege to work with our perinatal substance abuse treatment clients as well, and many of these have a dual diagnosis, so they're suffering with both mental illness and a substance abuse problem. And it's been devastating to see some of them become homeless. And I think what's even harder for me is seeing what the circumstances and the situations that some of these moms stay in order to avoid homelessness, in order to get their kids back. And so I'm grateful for the crisis center that we have, and unfortunately it doesn't have 50 beds because we could sure use it. But there's a lot of moms out there who aren't counted because they're staying in really awful situations, bad relationships, poor living conditions. And so when we talk about housing, this is why we really need housing, and it's more than just affordable housing. When we try to help people find apartments, their aid doesn't even begin to cover the monthly rent on the least expensive apartments in our county. So these are the people who I want to speak for today, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, I'll open it up to the public.
Al Segala, Taxpayer Association, and I'll make my comments real brief because we're running over time. Anybody ever heard about training fleas? Training fleas? Nobody? Interesting. You can take fleas, put them in a jar, and they'll hop right out. But if you screw the lid on, the fleas will jump till they hit the lid and tap, 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 tap. Pretty soon they won't be tapping very much anymore. Then you can unscrew the jar, and the fleas will only jump to the edge, to the lip of the jar. They can't jump further than that because they've been conditioned. It's a sense of expectation. We talk about wealthy people in our country. A lot of times there's envy and they're despised and they want to eat the rich. But they are rich because they're expected to be to begin with. And the other end of the spectrum, among the poor among us, some are a result of tragedy beyond their control, no doubt about it, even in the choice of husbands or wives. But to a certain extent, and maybe even a large extent, they're there because that is where their expectation is. They don't expect to get a job. They don't expect to be a success in business. They don't expect to work hard. Sometimes they receive sympathy and peer approval by being there. And so I would like to see stronger participation by the private sector in this area. The churches should be more involved. Rather than let somebody sleep on a pew, they should be involved with helping these people get a grasp on life and learn that they can jump beyond the edge of the jar. And I think by that private approach, more so than government subsidy, we will be able to climb out of it. We'll never achieve the utopia of not having anybody poor, because people can choose to do that if they want to. Anyway, that's what I'd like to see happen. Maybe it'll happen in the future.
Any other public comment?
Race, Rancho Calaveras. I want to give a respect to all the folks who are working with these homeless people. It must be emotionally awful. Okay. Two things I noticed prior. The school tried to get these modules away. It's sitting there. They're going to destroy it in a couple of months.
Actually 2 weeks.
Well, whatever, okay? County does have land. I don't know how great of amenities they can offer. It would be is there. It's almost there for the taking. And if nothing else, I'm sure that the school will cooperate with the county to give some temporary shelter. Now, one of the central point everybody is because the idea is that because the economy is pretty abundantly kind of bad. Putting those folks into an apartment or something, that's not going to solve that problem. They have a problem, addiction, or personal problems. Putting them up in an apartment won't do it. But if you can get into someplace, a temporary shelter, you can spend all these $1,000 to study. You know it's there. But in the long run, you would be better off financially as a county, as a community, to cooperate with the school, maybe cooperate with some of these other private agencies, to at least give those folks an opportunity to take care of that, whatever bad addictions they have, or mental or emotional problems. So one of these days, eventually they can get on their feet. It's not that you want to keep them there, keep them at the stage they are in, but give them a hands up to get started, to get a better life. Not to encourage them to be, because most of them, as we were said, they don't want to deal with the county. They have numbers to the county, and there's a certain a badge they're going to wear because they are in the county. County's substance abuse program or whatever. But if you give them an opportunity and you have something that you're going to be destroying, that's take them out of the element. So you don't have to search for the dead body. Just give them an opportunity, someplace to shelter, and someplace that they can be safe, that is available. Just take advantage of it. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Good morning. I'm Connie Dawson from Valley Springs, and I'd just like to say again, at the risk of being called heartless, that it's not the government's role to be taking care of the homeless. There's charities for that, and the government should be getting out of the way of the charities and making it easier for the charities to offer things to these people instead of putting regulations and things in their way to block these things. What I think is heartless is forcing somebody to part with the fruit of their labor that they worked for, that they've put their time, energy, and talent to earn their money, and then have somebody else come and say that they don't deserve it, somebody else does, and to redistribute it to those who haven't earned it. So that's just my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Rosemary Wilson from Oak Hill. I'm not sure if I'm going to get through this without crying. People in mental health, the behavioral health services group here, and the people the cowbirds, people who've been conducting these surveys, have been doing a great job, and we should show more compassion. I have my bachelor's, my master's, my PhD, postdoctoral work. I've been a professional in a high-tech arena, and yet I get diagnosed with Parkinson's. I am unfortunately unable to work. I go on disability, and I am at a level of income that is 1/4 of what I was receiving and earning in 1999. It is not that people get used to, that can't jump high because they've been preconditioned or conditioned not to jump high. Maybe it has something to do with them not being able to afford food and general safety and shelter that, of course, makes them homeless in the first place. I just think we should be improving and doing more of what behavioral health and
Rita Downs and her staff is trying to do when it comes to the Mental Health Services Act and the new projects that they have been introducing, and I've been a part of the Mental Health Services, the advisory board for a little while, and I just think you should be doing more for your neighbor than to be saying that we are strong, we're fit, we are fortunate, we are lucky, and we, because of that, we don't need to help others. They could well find themselves in a far worse position than I am, and a similar position to the people that have been counted, and that's only 10%. Supposedly it could be as little as 10%. I think we should have more, in general, more heart. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. This is an informational item only. It's not an action item. Is there any other board comments before we leave for lunch? Steve?
I had an interesting week last week on this very subject, and I want to tell my stories. I had a woman call who was losing her home because she had become ill. She had recently been divorced. Her husband, ex-husband, had been supporting her, but was laid off from his law enforcement job in Stockton. Payments stopped, house lost, foreclosure begun. Where does she go? I had a veteran from another part of my district call and say that his water was turned off in February and things were getting a little funky in his house. He was having a hard time figuring out whether to pay water bills and re-hookup charges, food, medical costs, or his house payments, which he was barely hanging on to. He decided that if he could get enough money, he would go back to Georgia, where he once lived long ago. I had another person call. It was a family of actually probably known to our mental health services agency, at least the kids were. They had received an eviction notice that day, and I was trying to delay it so they could get their stuff out of their house, but we enforced it anyway because one hand wasn't paying attention to the other. They were calling from the street outside their house, having been locked out and wondering what to do. These folks had worked all their lives, by the way, and had recently become, in older age, disabled and unable to work, so they were living off of fixed income. I had the chance to call every charity in this county, virtually, and every church in behalf of these three. Everyone in the towns they lived in, and then I began moving out to the Salvation Army, to every agency in this county in the public sector, and every private entity that I was aware of. And I spent 2 days trying to figure out how to deal with this. And I have to say that for those of you who have a utopian view of the state of charities in this county, that you would leave people to a very sorry fate if that was the only option they had. And I would say the same thing if you were to say that the government should take care of all of this. We do not have the wherewithal, and we've cut service staff by 1/3 in one of the critical departments that used to be able to serve this population, our CalWorks. This is not a situation where we argue ideologies about what sector ought to be dealing with it. This is not a situation that any of us have faced in our lifetime unless you're very old and went through the Depression. We have the worst economy, the most serious assault on our sense of well-being economically than we've had in our lifetime. And whether we come together across those jurisdictional lines and ideological lines for that matter, will really test what kind of a people we are. These are hard things to solve. I'm pleased to say that each one of these situations has, the water is being rehooked up, the Salvation Army came up with some of it, Community Service Center came up with some of it, a church helped out, We had CalWorks step up and support one of the situations. We got the revolving loan that these supervisors initiated and through CalWorks, and that got one family into a rental that was within their ability to pay with their fixed income on disability. It cobbled together after 3 very tough days of calling everything around. Now you multiply that 3 times 600, which is our real figure out there. And you can see that if all the King's horses, all the King's men from the public and private sector and every charitable agency and goodwill citizen in this county got mobilized, we might just very barely be able to cover this need. The real question is, does it matter? Does it affect any of the rest of us? And what I will tell you is that we're all poor when we fail to come together and deal with these situations, and in the end, the cost is much greater to our society. Let me also now announce something that I was going to do in my correspondence, because the real solution here is not so much charity as opportunity. I'm announcing today that we have settled the CBD Buena Vista lawsuit, and that the cogen plant is going ahead and has posted 24 jobs, ranging from laborer to engineering and plant operator and clerical and support. That goes through mother lode job training, and those will be part of both training and placement in the private sector. There are 12 positions related to this settlement that are going into the forest jobs, and those are also available through mother lode job training. And there's a third area of hiring in my district, 4 jobs that are going to be going to Railroad Flats School and West Point Elementary that will be in an enrichment program and are available to seniors to apply, people on fixed incomes and who are designed to allow kids to have a whole lot more exposure to extracurricular learning. There'll be a sports program, an arts program, a construction trades program, and a garden growing and home economics program within that. So if people are interested in any of those, my hope is that those of you who know people who have skills, are unemployed, are homeless, get down to mother lode job training, apply for these things, because the private contractors that are doing the hiring have asked them to help find people that they can employ. I really hope that we'll do better than this kind of conversation back and forth, that this is a serious enough thing for all of us to find common cause. Let's just get on with it. Let's try to let's put our work where our mouth is. Let's stop talking about what abstract group of people might help out and see whether we can make the calls and apply it to real life situations here in our county.
Any other comments? Yes, Supervisor Spellman.
I'm thankful for people that brought this forward today, and as always, this is something that really tugs at my heartstrings. I understand all sides of the issues. That's not to say I have a complete understanding, because I cannot empathize by the very definition of the word, because I have never been homeless. But I have, at one point in my life, spent 2 years in the service of others doing missionary work in and around the city of Philadelphia, which is a very large urban area. And I did come in contact with and participated in a lot of the services that were mentioned here today. So I am aware of those things that exist. And even though we are not in an urban area, I would be the first one to stand with you in admitting that that doesn't mean we have less of a problem in terms of the actual percentage of people. And it's very hard to quantify, as you mentioned, the exact numbers. But taking into account those people who were willing to participate and using that number to extrapolate to where the possible true number could be, that's quite astounding to think about in terms of what the actual number could be. A couple things that I wanted to make comment on. In the analysis that was given here from the study, one of the things that stuck out of my mind was, under the reasons people became homeless, 39.3% of the people stated the reason why they became homeless because they couldn't pay for their rent or their mortgage. Now, that doesn't mean that they're unemployed, because there's a separate number for unemployed. 57.8% said it had to do because they were unemployed. So that means these people are saying to the surveyor that they are not unemployed. So that means whatever type of employment they have, whether it's landscaping part-time or working part-time, whatever that may be, basically 40% of these people who are homeless do have work of some sort, just not enough to meet their needs to pay for rent. And that, to me, is extremely detrimental. There was testimony given about people who were willing to work. Obviously, these people are willing to work. They can't find the work in the type and quality that would provide them with enough income to be able to pay for rent. At one point in my life, I'm no longer in that situation, but at one point in my life, I was an entrepreneurial person, and I owned about a half a dozen rental properties, of which I've all divested myself of at this point in my life. But I keep track of those numbers in terms of trying to get a good analysis of where our county is at when you pick up the paper. How many places do you see for rent under $1,000 a month? Not many. And the ones that are go fairly quickly. And there's kind of beating each other up trying to get them. I know of a person personally that's a friend of mine who works full-time in Amador County, but his wage is not minimum wage. It's $10 an hour. But when you multiply 40 hours, that $10 an hour, that's $1,600 a month, gross. And you take out the taxes, the gas money for travel from Calaveras to Amador County. This person has a wife and kids, and the money that he makes from that job is just enough to pay for the rent as it is today. That means absolutely no money for food, no money for if his car breaks down, no money for water, gas bill, nothing. He does other things on the side for cash or whatever, to try to supplement what he needs to make his family budget work. So I would second what Supervisor Walensky said, that we need not focus on ideologies. We need to focus on what it actually exists. What exists is that the system has, in the past, it now has, and always will have, a small percentage of people who skim off the goodwill of others. However, we can't discount the whole lot as people who are taking advantage of the system. It's easy to say, but it's not true. It's just not. It's just not true. I'd like to see this board and other members of our staff here in the county focus on bringing jobs to this area that allow people a working wage. Even $10 an hour is not enough working full-time to even pay for the rent, hardly, for a house that would be suitable for a family. I'm talking about a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, which would be required if you had a husband, a wife, and more than 2 kids or more. And you can't get a house like that to rent for $1,200 or less, hardly. It just doesn't exist. I've watched it for years. Okay. The other thing I wanted to touch on here was that previously we had Mrs. Sawicki and other people came before the board and asked for approval for money for basically marketing of food stamps and those type of things. At that time, I expressed my disheartening towards where that money was being spent. What I said was I would like to see that money, instead of being spent, because she said the number of people in the last 2 years or 3 years, because the economy had doubled on the rolls of food stamps. So I used that and said, well, obviously if the number's doubled, these people are not having a hard time finding out where they need to go to get it. If they need to go get it, they talk to friends, family, whoever, organizations, and they find it. And one of the things that this survey brought up was that under the category of services needed but unable to get, only 13.3% of those surveyed said that they needed food stamps but weren't able to get them. So that means at the opposite end, 86.7% of the people surveyed said they either were getting or could get, if they needed to, food stamps. So the fact that we gave $124,000 just last month for people to do outreach to find out how many people were not being able to utilize food stamps in this county. I would have liked to have seen, I said it then, and I'll say it again today, I would have liked to have seen that $124,000 go towards providing some permanent housing. Or you know what I'm saying? Something that's a capital improvement that's going to be ongoing. And I want to thank Mr. Race. You're brilliant. Just for the record. I knew you would say that. What Mr. Race was referring to is Calaveras Unified School District has in its possession 6 classroom-size portable buildings, of which in about 2 weeks to 3 weeks maximum, they are going to be bulldozed, disassembled, and hauled away as scrap by a recycler. Mark Campbell, the superintendent of Calaveras Unified School District, has made those buildings available to me, not only to me, but he's made it available to me, and I've asked if they could be used possibly for a library in Copperopolis, maybe for other things that they could be used for. The school district's been hanging on to them for quite some time. They really need to get rid of them. If there was somebody that was willing to go and get those buildings, that's all the school district asks. They're free for the taking for any organization that has a need and has the ability to go and get them. Okay? So if it is that you know of some place where those could be located and used as a shelter, temporary or otherwise, for people who may be sleeping out under the stars, while that may not be a problem now, it is a problem in January. And those buildings are only available until the first week of June, maybe second week of June. And if you would like some help, if you think that you have a place that you could put those buildings and you need help getting them from point A to point B, I would be more than willing to help in that effort. So please contact me if that's of interest to anybody in your organizations. It's a start. It's something.
Rita, do you have anything to add?
Well, yeah, we need to be respectful to the seniors that we're going to the luncheon for them. I just want to say, like Steve, last week I was involved with a homeless situation. It was snowing. I know he wasn't counted, and we had some community members helping out, but due to weather, we needed to reach beyond sleeping in a church and on a sofa, and CalWorks stepped up to the plate to help out. This is not somebody who does not have an expectation of making better for himself. It's just circumstances at this point in time. So to say that people don't have expectations is not true. I've gone to the mental health meetings, to your living room, to the graduation ceremonies in behavioral health, to work that probation department's doing. There are great expectations among the clients of these agencies. If the churches, there's nothing stopping the churches or private charities in Calaveras from